Hello everyone, welcome to What If Quirkless Deku beacme The No.1 Scientific Hero Part 1. Before we start, please go support FailedDragon for writing that awesome fanfic. When a contest sponsored by island scientists comes up, Izuku Midoriya does not hesitate to enter at the chance of meeting the No.1 hero. But while designing a hero costume, Izuku begins to realize he does not just have a love for heroes, but a love for science and design. Chapter 1. Izuku heard the school bell ring and started packing his bag quickly. He had a limited amount of time today to get all of his homework done in time for him to watch his favorite show, Hero Watch. As he was putting his pencil case in his bag, a hand sprung across his desk, knocking his notebooks on the ground. Izuku ignored the laughs and bent down, putting them into a neat pile and throwing them in his bag. He got up and pulled his bag over his shoulders before leaving the classroom. The last to leave as always. Izuku walked quickly down the halls, trying his best to avoid contact with anyone who may stop to bully him. Though, Izuku didn't like to think of it as bullying. The other kids just liked to mess around a little, and sometimes it got a little rough, but that was okay. He could take it. It seemed like it may be Izuku's luckiest day yet as he left the school grounds and headed towards his apartment building. But all good things must come to an end, of course. As Izuku was passing under a small bridge, he saw Bakugo, and his friends were waiting on a bench for him. They knew Izuku's route home and always seemed to catch him when he least expected it. Izuku halted, starting to turn around and praying they hadn't seen him approach. His luck was out when he heard them come towards him. "Deku!" Bakugo yelled, holding his hand out and showing a small explosion. "Where do you think you're going?" "And nowhere, Kaken," Izuku replied, turning back towards his old friend. "That's what I thought," Kaken said with a smile. "Grab him!" Izuku didn't even have time to blink as one of Bakugo's accomplices shot out his fingers and wrapped them tightly around his right arm. His other friend grabbed his left arm, immobilizing him. He looked up just in time to see Kaken swinging his right arm at his face. For the next 5 minutes, though it felt like a lot longer, Izuku was punched, kicked and burned. The bullying resulted in Izuku's shirt being ripped in several places. Another uniform ruined. Usually Izuku would have gone to the school's washroom to change into regular clothes in case something like this happened, but he was in such a rush to get home he didn't have the time. Izuku carried along on his way home, thinking of what excuse he was going to tell his mother. Kaken sneezed and his quirk malfunctioned. "No, used it. There was a small fire on my way home and I helped someone get out through a window." "No," she would check the news. Izuku was running out of ideas as he made his way up to his floor, his mind reeling with excuses of how he got hurt. Finally he came face to face with his door, unlocking it and walking inside. He quickly did a scope of the apartment after putting on his house slippers. His mother was in the bathroom. Perfect opportunity. Izuku sprinted to his room and removed his school uniform, replacing it with an old pair of jeans and a plain blue shirt with the word bottle on it. After changing, he hid his old uniform under his bed. He would wait for an opportunity when he could throw it in the trash. He would probably wait till it was fuller, and then take it out so his mother wouldn't see it. "Gotta bring some birthday money to school to buy a new one," he reminded himself. Izuku grabbed his bag and made his way into the living room. His mother stood in the kitchen preparing dinner. "Hi, Mom!" he smiled. "I'm gonna finish my homework if that's okay." "Of course, sweetie," Inko replied, looking at her son with a warm smile. "Supper won't be too long, so you better hurry if you want to eat before Hero Watch." His mother's words reminded Izuku why he had been rushing home in the first place, and he quickly began to work on his English homework. Once he had finished his English homework, Izuku moved on to his math. Before too long, Izuku had all of his homework done, and his mother was asking him to set the table. He did as asked and ate silently with his mother. "I can't believe you'll be going to middle school in just a few months," Inko cooed, fixing Izuku's hair so it didn't hide his face so much. Izuku groaned at his mother's words. "Mum," he drawled as he shooed her hand away and messed his hair up a little more. Inko giggled at her son's frustrated look. I know. I'm not a kid, Mom. I'm almost 11," Inko responded, picking up her plate and carrying it to the kitchen. You better go set up, you only have 5 more minutes. Izuku quickly looked down at his Almight watch to see his mother was right, and quickly ran to his room to grab his latest notebook. Hero Analysis Volume 10 was scribbled on the cover, and Izuku sat down in front of the TV, opening his book. Hero Watch came on strong, talking about a recent fight involving a villain with a quirk that turned liquids to solids. Izuku scribbled down in his notebook, writing down the quirk's strengths and weaknesses. How the villain used his quirk versus how Izuku would use it. How the heroes used their quirks to capture the villain. Izuku was slightly sad when he realized the show was almost over, but was still writing down all the information he could get. And in our final moments of today's episode, we would like to announce a contest, the host stated. Scientists of Ireland are holding a contest for kids with the ages of 10 and 13 to design a hero costume for one of their favorite heroes. The winners from each country will get the chance to visit Ireland. Izuku's head shot up at the announcement, and he saw a poster with All Might standing proudly next to David Shield, the scientist who designed all of All Might's costumes. Here in Japan, the winners of each prefecture will be invited to the annual hero ranking, where the overall winner will be announced. A chance to meet heroes. A chance to meet All Might. Izuku was bursting with excitement as the show ended. His mother watched amused as her son bounced in his seat. Mom! Can I enter? Can I enter? Please, please, please! Izuku asked, running up to his mother and embracing her in a warm hug. Inko smiled down at her son, loving the excitement and happiness in his eyes as she said yes. Who? Izuku sat in his room, staring at all the names of heroes he had chosen as candidates for whose costume he would design. On the top of the list was All Might, of course, but Izuku was hesitant to pick him. David Shields was an amazing designer, and Izuku knew he would not be able to design something that would suit All Might's symbol as well as he did. Other names littered the page. Fourth Kind, ONESHOT, Starskin, 13, Ingenium. He couldn't choose. Maybe you should look at your notes, his mother said from the doorway. See if you can find something a hero is missing in their suit that could help them. The thought made Izuku excited once again as he went back to his recent notebook and began to backtrack through his notes. He looked for over an hour, trying to find anything that one of the heroes was missing that would aid them in a fight. And then he found it. Lady Violet was not someone Izuku had been considering. She was still fairly new, only making her debut a little over a month ago. Her hair was a deep violet color. Her quirk was the ability to change the temperatures of whatever she touched. Her weakness in her costume was that it didn't let her be very agile. Izuku remembered watching her debut videos. Lady Violet was not able to move very easily. The bulky back piece that had all her weapons kept her from being able to catch the villain as easily as she should have. Izuku remembered an interview with a reporter she had where she said she had refused different designs from other designers because she wasn't comfortable with her body as other female heroes were. Something purple. Something that let her be agile, while still carrying her weapons. Maybe a new design for her weapons. Instead of carrying around a large staff, she could carry one of those metal sticks that shot out when a button was pressed. Izuku's brain was running through ideas so quickly his hand was doing its best to keep up as he scribbled it all down. Every time he wrote one down, another came to mind. When Izuku finally finished, he looked down at the page he had filled to the brim with his words. He reread them, grouping the ones that were almost the same, and rewrote them down on the next page. Flipping to the page after, Izuku wrote down the needs and the wants, Lady Violet's and Izuku's separate. Needs: easy to move in. Belt to hold various weapons. Mid and long range weapons. Wants: Lady Violet. Various shades of purple. Respectful for a bigger body shape. Carries weapons she is familiar with. Wants: Izuku. A symbol of hot versus cold. Izuku stared down at the page, a small smile on his face. This is fun. Chapter 2. Izuku sat in his room looking from the computer to his notebook. No matter how long it took, Izuku was determined to draw Lady Violet's body as accurately as possible so he didn't have to use the skinny body sketch offered to those participating in the contest. Why did they only have a skinny option? The question bugged Izuku. He knew the answer and he hated it. Even at the young age of 11 years old. When Izuku finally mastered sketching Lady Violet's body shape, he began going through different options for the costume. By the end of the week, Izuku had a final copy of his hero costume design for Lady Violet. He had included multiple notes around it. Some described the material, some gave his reasoning, and some just to ensure the people who looked at it understood what it was. Picking up the large sheet of paper, Izuku slid it into the Wilk folder he would drop off in the drop box. Walking out of his room, Izuku saw his mother sitting on the couch watching her favorite drama. Izuku scrunched up his nose as he heard a man confessing his undying love for a woman, while his mother cried silent tears. "Mom!" Izuku called out. Inko looked up and paused her show before turning to him. "I'm ready to drop it off. Would you like to come?" "Of course. Let me grab my bag," Inko said. She quickly got up off the couch and went into another room. When she emerged, she had her bag on her shoulder and was wearing a light blue sweater. "Shall we?" As Inko and Izuku walked down the streets towards the local drop box for the contest, Izuku couldn't help but think back at his time designing the costume. At first, Izuku was only doing it to get a chance at meeting Almight and some of his other favorite heroes. But throughout the process, he couldn't help but enjoy doing it. Analysis was something Izuku loved, and adding in his own ideas to create something new gave him a feeling of accomplishment. He didn't just stop at designing a costume for Lady Violet, he had actually added in some support tech ideas he thought would help her. His mother had to buy him a whole new notebook just dedicated to weapons and support items, ideas he had not just for Lady Violet, but other heroes too. "I wish you would have let me at least have a peek at it." Inko's voice brought Izuku back to where he was, and he turned to her. "You have worked so hard on it, I wish I could see the end product." "I know, but I wanted it to be completely my own," Izuku responded. "I didn't want to risk changing it in case you had an idea." "I could have kept my ideas to myself, thank you," Inko jokes. "But when it comes to you, I'm sure there was nothing I could come up with to make it better." Inko pinched Izuku's cheek and he struggled to pull away. "Mum," Izuku drawled, and Inko pulled her hand away while giggling at her son's annoyed voice. When the two of them finally arrived at the drop box's location, they saw 4 other kids with their parents dropping off their own entries. "I wonder how they're going to go through all these entries," Inko thought out loud. The contest seemed to have gotten the interest of all kids between the ages of 10 and 13. Izuku's whole class was participating, even Bakugo, who had stated he was designing his own hero costume. He had gotten very upset when Izuku pointed out the rules specifically said to redesign a pro's costume. Izuku had regretted speaking the second Bakugo had turned to him with a horrid glare. Izuku walked up to the box and dropped the envelope in, turning to smile at his mother. "Now that that's done, let's go home and celebrate with some good katsudan," Inko said, placing her hand on her son's back. The teacher seemed to be dragging the lesson on and on as Izuku sat at his desk, trying to keep his excitement at bay. Izuku's leg had been bouncing up and down all day as his anxiousness grew. Tonight was the night Shizuoka and the rest of the prefectures were going to announce the winners of each region. After tonight there will only be 47 candidates, and all of them will get to attend the annual hero ranking celebration. And Izuku had a chance to be one of them. Izuku looked up at the clock. 20 more minutes. At that, his anxiety only grew. What if I don't make it? Maybe I can send my copy of the design to Lady Violet. I wonder if she'll like the design. I hope she doesn't hate it. Oh, please don't hate it. Izuku's thoughts were interrupted when his teacher asked him a question. Izuku answered the question after stuttering through his embarrassment at being caught not paying attention. He had the right answer though, so his teacher couldn't get mad at him any further. Izuku sighed, and did his best to pay attention throughout the rest of the period. He didn't need Bakugo or his friends to have an excuse to stop him on his way home again. His birthday money was getting exceedingly low. When the bell rang, Izuku was quick to pack his things. His classmates also seemed to be in a rush to get home, probably for the same reason he was. As he picked up his bag, Izuku noticed he was not the last out of the room this time, a first for him. He quickly walked into the halls and made his way to the exit. He did his best to keep up with everyone's fast pace as he went through the school's gates and into the street. Izuku all but ran to his apartment building, happy not to run into anyone, and raced up the stairs, too impatient to wait for the elevator. When he entered the apartment, he could smell a delicious scent coming from the kitchen. His mother stood by the stove and laughed as she watched Izuku struggle to get his red shoes off in a hurry. "Calm down, it isn't on for another 2 hours," Inko said as she giggled when Izuku fell over. "You still have plenty of time to finish your homework, eat supper, and maybe even have a bath." I know, Izuku said, finally getting his shoe off. "I'm just excited. And nervous." Inko gave him a loving look. Izuku had been sharing his different ideas for costume changes on various heroes. She hoped deep down in her heart that this contest had sparked enough passion in Izuku to switch his dream of becoming a hero into becoming a scientist. Izuku had never said it out loud to her yet, but she still hoped it was a possibility. Inko watched as Izuku burst from his room, almost sprinting to the table so he could begin his homework. A few giggles escaped her, and if Izuku had heard, he seemed to ignore them as he began his math homework. When Izuku finally finished the mountain of homework his teacher assigned, he quickly set the table before his mother could even ask. As she brought him his plate of food, she reminded him to eat slowly as not to choke. Izuku frowned at that. It only happened once. Izuku ate his dinner at an appropriate speed, engaging in conversation with his mother. She did a good job at distracting him, like she always did. They talked about Izuku's school day, her day at work, Mitsuki Bakugo's new promotion, and the new Almight action figure that should be coming out next week. When supper was finished, Izuku helped his mother with the dishes. He dried them as she washed. He couldn't help but think back to when he was too short to put them away. Sure, he was still barely able to reach, but he could still do it. He was now the exact same height as his mother, which was an accomplishment for him even though he was still the shortest boy in class. When the time had finally come for the winners to be announced, Izuku was so close to the TV his mother had to remind him she wanted to see too. Izuku blushed as he left his spot on the floor to sit next to his mother on the couch. The host of Hero Watch appeared on the screen with a wide smile and paper in hand. "Hello viewers," he began. "Today is the day you've all been waiting for. We will be announcing the winners of each prefecture in the Hero Costume Design Contest. Whose you may be asking? Well, let me introduce to you the pro hero and my co-host for today, Present Mike." "Hello viewers." Present Mike appeared on the screen. Izuku's heart almost leapt out of his chest upon seeing the pro. "Are you ready?" They began announcing the winners of each prefecture at random till finally. "And now for Shizuoka Prefecture," Present Mike began. "Taking on the challenge of designing the costume of a new pro hero, the winner from Shizuoka is Izuku Midoriya." An image of Izuku's design came onto the screen and he almost fainted. "Ah!" his mother screamed next to him. "Izuku Midoriya designed a new costume for Lady Violet. And a wonderful and thoughtful design it is." Izuku was frozen in place before he leapt up and hugged his mother. "I won well, I'm in the top 47, but still." Chapter 3. Izuku couldn't say he regretted entering the contest. He had thoroughly enjoyed designing Lady Violet a new costume, and it had helped awaken something inside of him. But when he got to school, he immediately realized the consequences for it. The second Bakugo and his friends saw Izuku enter school grounds, he was doomed. The whole day involved Izuku being punched, kicked, and tripped. During class he was made fun of for his looks, his quirklessness, and his lack of a father. The other students were not holding back and making him pay for winning in their prefecture. During lunch Izuku had tried very hard to hide from them, almost succeeding till he sneezed. Bakugo had heard the small sneeze come from behind the garbage bin and immediately exploded it, uncovering Izuku's spot of solitude. When Izuku finally got home it was hard to keep the bruises and scrapes from his mother, but he simply told her they played a rough game of soccer in gym class. She believed him, at least she acted like she did, and they enjoyed supper while discussing the odds of Izuku getting the new Ingenium action figure. "Oh, I've also been contacted by the people in charge of the contest," his mother said, picking up her dishes. "They said you'd get 2 extra tickets. One for me and one for a friend. Who would you like to invite?" Izuku almost immediately said Kaken till a memory from earlier that day. I don't know, he said instead. Inko seemed slightly surprised at his hesitance, but did not pester him. Who could I take? No one from my class will say yes for the right reasons. Izuku was on his way home from school when he suddenly got a notification on his phone. You've been added to the group chat Future Support Leaders. Izuku looked at his phone confused. He had never been added to a group chat before. Opening the social media app, he saw the names of some of the other members, all of them winners from the contest. Hello? Hey! Anyone else get their tickets yesterday? Yes. I'm so excited. Messages began popping up like crazy, and Izuku did his best to keep up with them all. He quickly wrote in a hi, smiley face, before continuing to walk home. Once he got home, he went to his room, opening up the app and engaging in the group's conversation. Izuku felt a warmth reach his chest at people replying to his comments and acknowledging his inputs. It was a nice change from his experiences with people at his school. A truly life-changing experience. One person in the group was especially interesting. A boy named Dionishi from the Ibaraki prefecture. Izuku was so captivated by the boy's responses to the conversation that he actually opened a new chat and invited him in. The boy entered the chat immediately and said a quick hello. Just like that, the two boys bonded over their love for heroes. Both agreed there was no hero like All Might, and Endeavor wasn't exactly favorable. They talked for the rest of the evening, only stopping for supper. I wish they gave us 3 tickets instead of 2. Die0379. How come? Izu2136. I want to bring my parents and my sister, but one of them has to stay home, sad face. Die0379. I only need 1 ticket for my mom, did you want the extra? Izu2136. Are you serious? Shocked. Die0379. Yep. I don't need it, so I'm glad to give it to you, smiley face. Izu2136. Izuku smiled down at his phone. It felt good to help someone who appreciated and didn't yell at him for it. Dai seemed very excited and said his parents and sister were very thankful. A friend. The night of the annual hero ranking celebration came a lot sooner than Izuku had suspected. They were not invited to the actual ranking ceremony itself, but the celebration afterwards, where the top 50 heroes all ate dinner and talked about who knows what. Izuku was doing his very best to tie the tie that went with his dark green suit. His mother had bought it upon realizing it would be a very formal event. Izuku did his best, but could not get the same result the man in the video did. After another try, he gave up, discarding the tie on his bed. His suit looked fine without it. When he exited his room, he saw his mother was in a matching green dress. She smiled upon seeing her son and gave him a quick hug. The two left the apartment and were met by a black car, waiting to escort them to the celebration. As they drove, Izuku fought his excitement as they drew closer to the hall. When they arrived, Izuku saw many heroes, paparazzi and policemen. Nervousness replaced his excitement as he saw a kid his age being interviewed by a woman with a microphone. His mother caught what he was looking at and placed her hand on her shoulder. Don't worry, you don't have to talk to them too, his mother soothed. Izuku felt slightly better at his mother's words. They quickly got out of the car, ignoring the people who tried to shove mics in their faces, and made their way into the building. A tall woman in a black suit swiftly came to them and escorted them to their seat at a table in the large room. Izuku was ecstatic to realize they would be sitting with Dai's family among many other candidates. The two of them immediately began talking about how All Might was going to be there, as their mothers talked amongst themselves as well. The dinner was amazing, but Izuku was too distracted by the various heroes seated around him. He could see Endeavor, Ingenium, Present Mike, Eraserhead, Midnight and more just from where he was seated. It took all of his willpower not to embarrass himself by asking all of them for their autograph, though some of the candidates already seemed to be doing so. When dinner was over, the host of Hero Watch took the stage at the front of the room. May I have everyone's attention? He said. The room went quiet as everyone turned to listen to him. I'm happy to say that the time to introduce Japan's representative in the iScientist Hero Design Contest has come. Before the winner is announced, I would just like to say that every single one of the designs were extraordinary in their own way. At the end of the day, we decided on the person who went beyond what was asked. The man paused as a small golden trophy in the shape of Almight was brought up. Next to the trophy stood Almight. Izuku's breath hitched at the sight of his favorite hero. And the winner and representative of Japan is Izuku Midoriya. Izuku sat frozen in place as Dai shook him ecstatically. Finally he was encouraged to stand and he slowly made his way to the stage. He stared at All Might in awe as he handed him the trophy and gave him an excellent job, kid. And now for a special surprise. Izuku turned to the announcer with a confused face, and then he saw it or more like her. There she stood, in all her glory. Lady Violet was in the costume Izuku Midoriya had spent hours designing for her. She smiled at him and picked up something from her belt. With the push of a button, a metal pole appeared, just like Izuku had discussed in his plans. Izuku didn't know what to do, so he cried. Tears fell from his face as he looked at what he designed come to life. Lady Violet immediately came forward and hugged him before wiping his tears away. You know, I really am thankful, Midoriya, she said with a smile. Not just for you designing the perfect costume, but for choosing to design for me. Out of all the heroes, you chose me. Thank you. Well, you are an amazing hero, Ms. Lady Violet, Izuku said, his face beet red. Do you plan on following into the support field? Lady Violet asked as she escorted Izuku back to his table. Izuku stopped, thinking. Why yeah, he said. I think I am. Chapter 4. Izuku was hesitant to enter his school's gates. It was his final day in elementary school and he wasn't sure how he felt. Before he would start middle school, Izuku and his mother would get the chance to travel to Ireland to find out who the international winner of the contest would be. And his classmates were furious at him for it. You would have suspected they might be proud to know Japan's winner and representative, but they weren't. They still made fun of him, pushed him and made his school life hell. Izuku had learned through the other 46 prefecture winners that friends don't hurt friends, and it was hard news for Izuku to swallow. He still wanted them to be his friends. He wanted Bakugo to be his friend. To see him as a person and not Deku. But his dream of this was fading as he looked back at the things Bakugo had done to him thus far. Out of my way, Deku, Bakugo said as he plowed past him and into the gates. Izuku watched his back before following. Wait! He yelled. Bakugo seemed shocked at being yelled at and turned to give him a cold glare. What do you want, Deku? He yelled at him. We aren't friends. I realize that now, Izuku stuttered, trying to keep his confidence. We never were, dumbass, Bakugo yelled angrily. I also realize I can't be a hero, but I can be a scientist. And I will. Just watch me, Izuku said, this time not giving Bakugo the chance to respond. He walked past him and into the school. I will. Izuku couldn't say he was happy with how his last day had gone. He was still bullied throughout the day, but Bakugo had not participated in it like he usually did. Izuku was just hoping Bakugo's anger wasn't building and that he wouldn't explode when they started middle school. Izuku finished packing his bag and carried it out into the living room. He placed it next to his mother's bag and waited for her to get off the phone. They were going to be picked up again and taken to the airport. It would be both of their first times on a plane, and Izuku knew his mother was as excited as he was. Ready? Inko asked as the call ended. Izuku nodded, grabbing the bags. Good, Mitsuki said she's gonna watch the apartment for us. Let's go! They hurried down to the black car that waited for them. The whole way to the airport, Izuku was telling his mother about all the things he's read about Ireland. Inko nodded and asked questions here and there to keep her son occupied. She loved listening to him talk about almost anything. His rambling always comforted her for some reason, even if she couldn't understand all that he said because he was speaking too fast. When they reached the airport, Izuku couldn't help but stare at all the planes through the windows. He tried to estimate which one he would be boarding through the gate number on his ticket, and the closest gate number to them. When they finally reached the small plane, Izuku all but ran down the hall to enter, his mother following him with a small smile on her face. The plane was small, but spacious with 8 seats on either side of the aisle. Izuku quickly chose a window seat and his mother sat next to him. They weren't sure if anyone would be joining them on the plane, so just in case they made sure their carry-ons were in the proper spot and there was still room for anyone else's should they be joined. No one came, and the pilot declared it was time to leave. Izuku stared out the window, watching as they lifted into the air. The sights were amazing. Throughout the flight, Izuku and his mother played games, chatted, and took naps. When they finally arrived at Island, Izuku was just waking up from his second nap. "And we have arrived at Island," the pilot said over the speaker. "I wish you luck in the contest and I hope you have a wonderful time exploring the island." Izuku and his mother thanked the pilot before leaving the plane. They were greeted by a woman who escorted them through security and onto the island itself. Izuku was in awe of all the technology and quirks being shown off when they entered. Everywhere he looked there was something cool to look at and examine. They decided it was best if they went to the hotel first to dispose of their luggage. They had 2 days to spend on the island and Izuku did not want to miss a thing. When they left the hotel, Izuku picked up the map they were given and pointed to one of the markings. "Can we go to the museum first? They apparently have so many cool things there," Izuku asked his mother excitedly. Inko agreed and they made their way to the large building. Many people were going in and out of the building, some looked like tourists, and some looked like they lived here on the island. When Izuku entered the building, a giant red car immediately caught his eye. Running forward, Izuku leaned on the bar surrounding the car and gasped in awe. "Cool, isn't it?" a boy with a cool accent said. He was short, even shorter than Izuku, and had black hair and tan skin. "Yeah. Sorry if my English is not very good," Izuku replied, blushing slightly. On Island, most people spoke English since it was a common language across the world, though Izuku was not the most fluent. "That's okay, I'm not the best at it either," the boy replied, smiling. "My name is Samuel Rodriguez, I'm the Brazil representative. And yourself?" The boy outstretched his hand and Izuku took it. "Izuku Midoriya, Japan representative. Nice to meet you, Samuel." Izuku smiled and he shook the boy's hand. "Would you like to tour the island together? I have seen many candidates group up and it would be nice to have the company of someone other than my brother," Samuel asked while gesturing to the tall young adult behind him who looked around bored. "Sure," Izuku replied excitedly. The four made their way through the museum and to many different demonstrations held on the island before it was time for supper. Looking at the map, they had all agreed to go to a restaurant that served American food. "My parents couldn't come because of work," Samuel said as they sat down at a table. "So that's why Diego came with me. Though I would have preferred it if Lola had come." "Who's Lola?" Izuku asked curiously. "Oh, she's my brother's fiancée. She's really nice. A lot nicer than my brother." At that, Samuel received a flick on the back of his head, given to him by his brother. Izuku laughed at the brothers' interaction. He had noticed how weird the two of them acted towards each other, and couldn't help but wonder if this was normal for siblings to do. It had always been just him and his mom after his dad left when he was 5, so he never had a sibling to play with. Izuku watched as the brothers almost got in a full-on fight, pinching each other every chance they got. "I think I'm okay being an only child if that's the case." Chapter 5. David Shield sat at his work desk, looking over a new design. He looked up from his work to see his 13-year-old daughter was still in the corner reading a book. He sighed, knowing he was supposed to be taking her out for a day of fun while the candidates of the hero costume contest were on the island. He had hoped that taking her around the island might give her a chance to make a few new friends with people around the world. But work came first and David had plenty of that. Standing up from his desk, David walked over and sat on the floor next to his daughter, placing a hand on her back. "Just because I'm stuck here doesn't mean you are," he said. "Why don't you take some money from my wallet and get some bubble tea from the shop down the street?" "I'm good here, Dad," she responded, her eyes not leaving her book. "Maybe you could go to one of the demonstrations. It might give you a chance to meet some of the kids from different countries," David continued. "I don't think they'll want to meet anyone like me, Dad," she said quietly. "Melissa," David sighed. Did those kids start bugging you again? Melissa was the only quirkless kid on the island. Quirkless people only took up 20% of the world's population, and they were especially rare in youth. No matter how hard David and the teachers at the island middle school tried, kids always seemed to leave Melissa out on something. They weren't so mean as to be called bullies, but they definitely weren't her friends. Maybe, Melissa said finally. They just pointed out that the kids visiting would rather focus on the ones with the ability to become a hero is all. And it's true. Most of these kids probably want to be a hero themselves or be a scientist like you, Dad. Melissa, you can't stay believing that no one wants to be your friend because you're quirkless, David insisted. Mandy Nelson has been trying to get you to hang out with her ever since she got her last month. Give her a chance and you'll see. His daughter just shrugged and continued to read her book. With one last sigh, David got up off the floor. I gotta go meet up with the people organizing the seating for tomorrow's dinner. Can't have them seat your uncle at a different table now, can I? He said. At the mention of Melissa's uncle, her mood immediately changed. Almight wasn't going to be showing up till tomorrow, and Melissa was ecstatic she would get to see him again. David left her to her reading and walked down the hall to meeting room C, which was being used by the organization committee. When he entered, he saw 4 men and a woman standing around the large table. Circular papers were scattered across the table, representing the tables that would be in the actual ballroom. Each person was setting random papers with the name of a country or a pro-hero down at each table. You don't mind if I make a request to you? David asked the group. Of course not, the man in a blue suit said. Who would you like at your table, sir? If you don't mind, my daughter and I would love to have Almight seated with us, he said, smiling kindly at the group. Already had that arranged for you, sir, the woman said. I suspected you two would want to catch up. Thank you, well, that was all I dash. Actually, one more thing, one of the men said. He was the shortest of the group, and he was staring down at a piece of paper in front of him when David looked over. Your daughter is quirkless, correct? The question surprised David. He almost wanted to yell at the man that it didn't matter. But then he thought, why does this matter? Why is he asking that? Why, yes, she is. Why do you ask? David responded, looking at the man curiously. Well, the candidate from Japan is also quirkless, the man responded, looking up to meet David's gaze. And my associates have only seen him getting along with one of the other candidates. So I was thinking, it might be best to put the 2 of them at your table. If that's all right with you, of course. One of the candidates is quirkless? David asked, shocked. Yes, the one from Japan, the man replied, wondering if David had heard anything apart from that. Yes, please put him at my table. This would be a wonderful chance for Melissa, David said excitedly. He couldn't help but hope his daughter would become friends with this kid. He also hoped that the child could share better stories about being quirkless so Melissa could have a little bit of hope for the future. All right, I'll add the Japan and Brazil candidates to your table then. The man smiled as he placed the 2 papers next to his table. Izuku! Slow down! Inko yelled at the boy. Izuku was a little too excited to get everything he wanted down before the dinner celebration tonight. He stopped running and turned to wait for his mother. When she caught up to him, he continued leading the way to the small souvenir stand. It had been set up for this special occasion since the island wasn't used to tourists. Izuku's eyes roamed the stand, looking at all the t-shirts, hoodies, and keychains. His mother told him that he could choose only one thing to bring home. His eyes caught a small figurine of a red car and a driver wearing a lab coat. Upon further inspection, Izuku realized that the car was the same car Almight was known to drive during the beginning of his career in America. And the driver was none other than David Shield himself. To say Izuku was a fan of David Shield was an understatement. David Shields was the scientist who had designed all of All Might's hero costumes. He was also famously known for his support gear, especially the static staff, a weapon that emitted electricity while used by heroes in America and Europe. Can I get this one, Mom? Izuku asked, picking up the small figurine. It would look great next to my All Might action figure in his young age costume. Inko laughed at her son as she bought the souvenir from the vendor. Izuku carried it like it was the holy grail of souvenirs. Not holding on too tight, but tight enough that he wouldn't drop it. As they made their way along the walkway, Izuku spotted another demonstration about to begin. The two agreed that it would be the last one before they went back to the hotel to prepare for tonight. Izuku stared in amazement as the scientist demonstrated his prototype of a glove that shot a net out of the palm. It would be very useful to catch villains on the run, but other than that it didn't have much of a purpose. Cool design, but it's so bulky. And with only one use I can't see it being very handy. When the demonstration ended, the two made their way back to the hotel. They both took turns showering and got dressed up in the same outfits they wore at the hero ranking celebration. Izuku gave up on the tie after a few tries again. His mother giggled as she saw his frustrated look. Ties are evil, Izuku pouted, glaring at the piece of clothing. His mother just laughed and ushered him to the door. Come on, Samuel is probably waiting in the lobby, his mother said. At the mention of his new friend, Izuku hurried down the hall to the elevator. Him and Samuel had bonded quite easily, and he was excited to get to spend more time with him. Maybe even ask for his contact information so they could stay in touch. When they got to the lobby, Izuku looked around, trying to find his friend in the mass of people. He finally spotted him and his brother in the corner of the room. They were both wearing plain black suits with bow ties. Formal and classy. Samuel! Ready to go? Izuku said as he approached them with his mother following. Yeah. I hope we're seated together. I heard some workers talking about how they were putting candidates next to other candidates they got along with during their free time. Hopefully they saw us together, Samuel said as he fell in step with Izuku. The group made their way to the giant building in the center of the island. They waited in a long line as people trickled in and were escorted to their tables. When they made it to the front, they found out that they were indeed at the same table. Both of them smiled enthusiastically at the news. When they made it to the table, they saw they were the first ones there. Izuku saw that there were only 3 seats left, and guessed it was going to be another candidate with their parents. Izuku and Samuel talked enthusiastically as they saw heroes seated at different tables. Izuku made sure to explain the Japan heroes and their rankings as Samuel did the same for the South American ones. Suddenly the two were distracted as 2 of the seats next to them were taken. Izuku looked to his right to see a girl, probably a few years older than him with blonde hair, sit next to him. He quickly shot her a kind smile as his face turned beet red at her arrival. He then looked at the man next to her and... Oh my fanba heart. DTH your dash. Izuku stuttered like crazy as he stared at the man. The man just smiled down at him amused. Hello, my name is David Shield and this is my daughter Melissa, the man introduced. I think I'm gonna have a heart attack, Izuku muttered to himself, and Samuel nodded in agreement next to him. Shield laughed at his comment and began talking to Inko and Diego. So, what are your names? Melissa asked. Izuku shook his head as to get out of his starstruck and stretched out his hand. My name is Izuku Midoriya, from Japan. And this is my friend Samuel Rodriguez from Brazil, Izuku introduced. Melissa shook his hand and smiled before shaking Samuel's hand as well. Have you enjoyed the island? It must be different from where you guys are from, Melissa said, starting the conversation. It really is. There are so many cool aspects to how you guys keep the island guarded, Samuel said excitedly. I've never got to see so many different quirks in 2 days, Izuku said. Oh yeah, Uncle Mike told me you guys are rather strict with quirk usage, Melissa said. Samuel's mouth hung open at her words. Uncle Mike as in Almight? He said enthusiastically. Melissa blushed. Oh yeah, I guess it must sound kinda weird to someone who doesn't know him personally. Only a little, Samuel laughed. Actually, while we're still on the topic of quirks, Izuku, you never told me yours. Mine is called Sticky Fingers. I can make my fingers sticky on command and they will stick to any surface I touch, Samuel demonstrated when he stuck his fingers to a fork. Oh, well, Izuku stuttered. I don't actually have a quirk. Izuku lowered his head as he rubbed the back of it with his hand, embarrassed. Why you don't? Neither do I, Melissa said happily. Izuku's head shot up at her words. Really? I've never met another quirkless person my age before, Izuku exclaimed. Neither have I, Melissa said. Neither have I, Samuel joined. Well, not until right now. Now I know too. Melissa and Izuku laughed at Samuel's comment. Before I forget, let's put our contacts in each other's phones. The three passed each other their phones, adding their contacts into the other's phones. Izuku couldn't help but smile at having two international friends, one of them quirkless and the daughter of All Might's costume designer. As time drew closer to the beginning of dinner, Melissa began to look around excitedly. Who are you looking for? Samuel asked. The third person of our party. Melissa smiled, not giving away their celebrity table guest. A few minutes later, whispers began to sound around them as All Might arrived in the ballroom. To Izuku's slight surprise, All Might made his way directly to his table and sat in between David Shield and his mother. Sorry I'm late, All Might said, his signature smile on his face. I couldn't find my tie. Izuku's vision blurred as he fell off his seat and onto the floor. Chapter 6. When Izuku opened his eyes, All Might was having his hand back and forth in a rapid motion in front of him. Izuku shot up and stared at the hero as his mother rubbed his back worriedly. Izuku looked back and forth from his mother to his favorite hero before pointing to All Might. It's you! Izuku exclaimed. All Might laughed at the comment and nodded. Yes, I am here. Though I am surprised that you are so shocked. I am the one who gave you your trophy, you know, All Might said, helping Izuku stand. Yes, but back then I had time to calm myself before I approached you. And last time I knew that if I won, you would be the one giving out the trophy. And this time I was already in shock at sitting at the same table as David Shield. And Izuku became a mumbling mess as he tried to reason his fainting. That's true, you did say you were close to having a heart attack when Senior Shield sat down, Samuel added, interrupting Izuku's spiel. They all took their seats as food began to arrive at the table. Everyone was immersed in the food and barely made conversation. Only Inko and Shield were still conversing about the difficulty that came to raising a kid on your own. Both Melissa and Izuku began to blush as their parents began to share embarrassing stories about them. Don't tell that story, Melissa exclaimed as her father began to tell Inko about one extremely embarrassing one. That's it, she said as she turned to Izuku and Samuel. My father may be smart when it comes to science, but he is extremely stupid when it comes to slang. He once used the word slay as a way to define one of his new designs. He said my design is slay, isn't it, Melissa? Izuku and Samuel began to fight their laughter as her father gave her a shocked/hurt look. He gripped his chest to demonstrate the betrayal he felt, which only resulted in the rest of the table joining their laughter at the poor man. Soon enough, a man stood on the stage at the front of the room and announced it was time for the winner to be announced. The room turned to look at him as he announced that the winner was a girl from Denmark who had designed a costume for one of Denmark's popular pro-heroes. The table clapped enthusiastically as the girl received her trophy and said her thanks to her family and friends who encouraged her to enter. Izuku guessed that they had given her a heads-up since she had a small speech prepared. He wasn't upset he had lost, he didn't expect to win. And he was still ecstatic to be sitting at the same table as All Might and David Shield. The screen behind the stage lit up and showed the overall ranking. Izuku was shocked to see that he was in 9th place, making him in the top 10. Samuel shook Izuku's arm when he saw his friend had placed so high, and Melissa looked at him in awe. Stop that, Samuel, you made the top 20, you know, Izuku said, trying to divert the attention off of him. Yeah, but you still made the top 10, Izuku, his friend responded, unwilling to calm down. Excellent job, young Midoriya, All Might exclaimed. I hope you follow this talent in the future. I am excited to see what you become in the coming years. Izuku looked at his hero in awe and thanked him 1,000,000 times for his words. Do you plan on pursuing the support field? Shield asked. Well, yeah, though all I'm good at so far is ideas. I don't know much about actually putting it into practice, Izuku said, slightly embarrassed at all the attention he was receiving. I recommend doing some extra studying in the field of physics and chemistry while in middle school. It will help you put your ideas into play when you get into a support course in high school, Shield said as a way to encourage the boy. Izuku took his advice to heart, and immediately began planning in his head how he was going to do so. I wonder if I can take a few classes online. The middle school I'm going to isn't exactly known for their academics. When the night finally ended, Izuku was both satisfied and disappointed. He had gotten the chance to ask Almight and David Shield various questions he had and was amazed by their answers. He had even watched as his mother got along well with his favorite hero. But he was sad the night had to end, wishing he could have more time to ask even more questions. When him and his mother made it to their hotel room, Izuku was exhausted and almost dropped onto the bed. He resisted though, not willing to ruin his suit by sleeping in it. Once he changed into his All-Might pajamas, Izuku plopped down and was met with a deep sleep where he dreamed his favorite hero took him on as his sidekick. When Izuku woke up the next morning, he was sad to realize it was time to leave the island. He silently helped his mom pack their suitcases and did a quick look around the room to make sure he didn't forget anything. While they were checking out of the hotel, he tried to look around to see if he could say goodbye to Samuel one last time. He had already said goodbye to his two new friends before he left dinner last night, but he still hoped to see one of them one more time before he left. His mother finally finished checking out and then made their way to Gate F, where their plane would be located. This time, they weren't the only two on the plane. There were 3 pro heroes making their way back to Japan as well. Izuku's fanboy heart was leaping with joy when Best Jeanist congratulated him on making the top 10. "You made Japan proud," the hero said. Izuku actually built up the courage to ask him and the 2 other heroes, 13 and Mr. Brave, for their autographs. The heroes were happy to sign his notebook. "Hero analysis for the future. Plan to be a hero?" 13 asked. Izuku blushed as 13 asked if it was okay if she read some of his analysis. "Yeah, go ahead." But no. I've given up on the whole hero thing. I think I'll do much better in the support field," Izuku said shyly. "Well, you certainly have a good start. These analyses are amazing. This should help you and your clients a lot when discussing what they need for hero work," 13 said as she continued to read some of Izuku's work. "Thank you," said Izuku. He lowered his head at the attention he was receiving from one of his favorite heroes. Izuku typed away on his mother's computer. The home office was rarely used for work anymore since his father had left, but Izuku used it from time to time for homework or hero analysis research. Currently, Izuku was using it to find online science courses he could take during the next 3 years of middle school. UE support students have to offer a physical prototype for one of their support item ideas. If I'm gonna get into UA, I need to start thinking now about how I'm gonna get materials and experience on building things, Izuku thought. When he finally found 3 courses for beginners, Izuku called his mother into the room. "I know I'm still gonna have all my other classes, but I can work on them while the other kids are in Quirk control class. I'm already stuck sitting there and I'll have plenty of time to work on them, I promise," Izuku rambled, hoping he could convince his mother to sign him up for the classes. Originally he was only going to take a chemistry and a physics class, but he thought he may as well take a biology one so he could understand all aspects of science. "Oh, if you think it will help, I guess I can sign you up," his mother said, slightly hesitant. "But you have to keep your regular grades up," she added sternly. Izuku smiled at his mother as they entered the necessary information into the online forms. "Thanks, Mom," Izuku whispered as they sent the forms in. Inko smiled down at him before embracing him in a big, warm hug. "Oh honey, I'm so proud of you. You are gonna do amazing things in this world, I just know it," she said. After she left the room, Izuku began watching videos online about what materials were most commonly used in support items, hero costumes, and more. Izuku scribbled down the names in a new notebook he had gotten. The words Support Research Volume 1 written on the front. As he wrote down the different materials, he took notes on their characteristics and why they were so commonly used. The end of the break came quicker than Izuku had thought it would. During the break, he had filled his Hero Analysis Volume 10 notebook, and his first support research notebook was almost half full with information. Izuku stood at the door of his apartment putting on his red sneakers and his research notebook under his arm. His mother had gathered enough money to buy Izuku a second-hand laptop, and he carried it in a bag over his shoulder, his yellow backpack on his back. He quickly yelled one more goodbye to his mom and heard a "good luck, sweetie" yelled back from the kitchen. He made his way to his new school and couldn't help but wonder how he would be treated this time around. He had not seen any of his old classmates, including Bakugo, since their last day of elementary school. All he could do was silently hope that they would not be angry at him for making the top 10 in the contest. Izuku had stayed in contact with Samuel and Melissa since his trip to Island and was happy with how close the three had become. It was sometimes difficult because of the different time zones, but they still found time to all talk. Samuel had recently shared his dream of going into the business industry, and Melissa shared that she wanted to follow in her father's footsteps. Izuku smiled while thinking of his friends. Putting aside his fear of his classmates, he made his way to his class and found a seat at the very back. Even if he didn't have any friends in his school, he had 2 friends who believed in him outside these walls. The first half of the day went slightly like normal. He was tripped, yelled at, and mocked by his peers. The only difference was that Bakugo was not the one to start the teasing. Instead, it was one of his friends, and he seemed to be the one following. It was odd, but Izuku ignored it as the time got closer to Quirk control class and his free period to work on his online class. When the school board holding the online classes saw Izuku applied for 3 beginners courses, they contacted his mother and told her about a general science course he could take. That way he would have one teacher and still get all the information he wanted to learn. When the time finally came, Izuku started pulling out his laptop to begin work when one of his classmates noticed. "How come Deku gets to just sit there and play on his laptop?" the kid yelled angrily. The rest of the class joined in, angry that he got out of the boring lessons. I'm taking a general science course. I swear I'm not fooling around, I'm still learning dash." "So what? You think you're smarter than us or something, Deku?" Bakugo yelled. "And no, of course not," Izuku responded. It was the first time today that Bakugo had gotten so angry at him. "That's enough, class," their teacher interrupted. "Midoriya is quirkless, so he can't participate in our lesson. That's why his mother set him up in an online class." As the teacher said this, they emphasized on the fact that Izuku was quirkless, which made him lower his head. Izuku was quick to realize that the teachers here favored those with powerful quirks. At the beginning of the day, they were only talking about the different quirks in the class, and the teacher praised them all for their power and uniqueness. Especially Bakugo's, the teacher had upped his confidence way overboard as he shared his awe of his powerful quirk. Izuku just kept his head down during the period and focused on the online lesson he was given. He took notes in his book about the different warning signs commonly seen in a science lab. His teacher was beginning the course with common safety lessons and said he would continue with biology next. When Izuku finished reading through the lesson and finalizing his notes, he realized he still had another half hour before his class would be moving on from their quirk control lesson. He quickly pulled up his teacher's contact and messaged him asking him a few questions revolving around the course material. The teacher responded immediately, seemingly excited to discuss with him the lessons to come. Izuku got excited as he talked to the teacher back and forth. When his class was finally done, he sent a quick thank you saying he had to return to his lessons in school and closed his laptop. The rest of the day was bland in comparison. Mostly review from what they had learned last year. When the day was finally over, he made his way home. The route was similar, only a little longer than his elementary route. As he walked, he thought back to his conversation with his general science teacher. He seemed like a very smart individual, and Izuku made note to ask him if he had any hobbies other than teaching. When he got home, he immediately started talking to Melissa and Samuel online, who were asking about his first day. The three went into a heated conversation about what was more important in a hero: heart, strength, or brains. At the end of the night, they all agreed that a hero needed all three to be successful, and Izuku went to sleep with a smile on his face. Chapter 7. Izuku's relationship with his classmates were more or less the same from elementary school. The only difference was that his daily beatings turned into weekly ones, and it was always caused by him making a mistake. He would offer help to someone when it was unwanted or bump into someone after being shoved, and it would result in Bakugo and his friends giving him a lesson. Izuku was beginning to learn from the lessons and started only offering help when it was asked, not just when it was needed. He also became better at dodging people while he was falling, leaning his weight in the opposite direction and hoping no impact came. While his relationship with his peers stayed the same, his relationship with his homeroom teacher seemed to be much worse than from elementary school. This teacher was much more vocal for his dislike of Izuku and made sure to dock marks for the smallest things on any of his homework. Izuku did his best to ignore it and kept it secret from his mother. He didn't want her to be upset. His relationship with his general science teacher, however, was exceptional. Izuku had found out his teacher was actually a part-time support engineer as well as a science teacher. Izuku had asked him various questions about the work he has done and who he's done it for. A bond had fallen over the two, and he found out his teacher worked at a company in Shizuoka Prefecture. "So you're taking the course so you can get ahead of the game?" Mr. Murata. "Yes, sir, I want to learn about the basics before I begin exploring my own ideas." Midoriya. "Well, if you'd like, I could get you an internship at my company. My boss has been looking for middle school students to help clean the labs and do coffee runs. You would also get the chance to possibly help with some of the work." Mr. Murata. "Really? You would do that for me?" Midoriya. "Of course, you are my brightest student this year, and you definitely show passion from what I've seen. I'll contact you parents with the details." Mr. Murata. Izuku was excited to find out his mother approved the idea of him interning at his teacher's company. "I would rather you build experience in a safe environment with adult supervision than you experimenting in your room," was her reason for agreeing. It only took a week for all the paperwork to be filled out and for Izuku to finally begin his internship at Masuda and Company. He would be there after school on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday every week, the same time his teacher would be. Mr. Murata even said he would give Izuku extra lessons if they had time for them at work. Today was Izuku's first shift, and he was making his way there from school when he was stopped. "Where the hell are you going, Deku?" Bakugo yelled from behind him. Izuku turned to see it was just Bakugo this time, and his friends were nowhere in sight. And nowhere, Kaisen," Izuku responded, trying to continue on his way. "Don't walk away from me!" Bakugo yelled before grabbing Izuku's arm. "This isn't the way to your house, Deku! Stop messing around and tell me where you're going." "I got an internship. I start work today," Izuku blurted. He had not planned on telling anyone since he didn't want any unwanted attention from his peers. Bakugo let go of his arm and walked away angrily, leaving Izuku on the sidewalk. Izuku continued on his way, trying to swallow his fear of what may happen at school the next day. When he arrived at the company building, he was greeted by a kind woman at the front desk who gave him a tour of the first 2 floors that Izuku had clearance on. Izuku wandered the halls with the woman in awe. She showed him the different labs, introduced him to the workers in their offices, and dropped him off in the break room where Mr. Murata would be soon to pick him up. "Midoriya, you're shorter than I imagined." Izuku turned to see a tall man in a lab coat. He matched the profile pic of his teacher, and he smiled as he got to meet the man in real life. "Mr. Murata," Izuku said before approaching his teacher and offering his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Sensei." Mr. Murata shook his hand and motioned for Izuku to follow him. "Come on, I'll show you the list of cleaning you'll be doing in Lab C. If you finish before 5, you might be able to help me in my latest project," he said. Izuku found that he didn't really mind the tedious job of cleaning the lab. There was specific equipment he wasn't allowed to touch, but the things he did need to clean were simple tools. He also swept and mopped the room before making sure he put everything back in its original spot. Mr. Murata has told him that scientists and engineers were very serious about keeping their labs organized so they could find everything quicker. This time Izuku was not quick enough to get to help Mr. Murata in his work, but he didn't mind. He had gotten the chance to meet many of the other workers when they filed into the lab to check up on him. Some of them even showed him what the equipment did. His favorite part was when he got to help with the testing of a new tracking device. They had attached the device to Izuku's shirt and told him to go anywhere on the second floor. Izuku had hidden himself underneath the desk of the second-floor supervisor, who slightly laughed at Izuku's excitement. The device worked, and they were able to find Izuku quickly. His shift came to an end and Izuku rushed home, excited to tell his mother about the day's events. His mother listened to him intently as she finished supper. They weren't used to eating so late, but she said it was worth the wait to eat with her son. Izuku quickly finished his homework and talked to Melissa and Samuel for an hour before going to bed. Time skip 1 year. Izuku was happy to begin learning the more compact aspects of physics and chemistry, not just the beginner's points from his last online course. Mr. Murata had already set him up with extra lessons, so he was well ahead. He had also gotten to learn many things about making ideas a reality at his internship. Whenever someone needed an extra hand, Izuku was the one they chose. He was always happy to take a break from cleaning to learn something new. Usually he was just holding something or giving his opinion on the look of a prototype. As Izuku made his way into the building after his first day of school, he saw Mr. Murata was waiting for him in the lobby. "There you are, Midoriya," the man said as Izuku approached. "I have some great news. Follow me." Izuku followed him up the stairs and into his office. Izuku took the seat in front of his desk and waited excitedly for Mr. Murata to speak. "So, we are changing your schedule around a bit. You will still be doing cleaning work on Mondays and Tuesdays, but instead of Thursdays, you'll be coming in on Saturdays," Mr. Murata began. "And it is on Saturdays that we will begin teaching you many skills needed in the support field. Sewing, welding, you name it. We're gonna teach you how to do it." What? Really? Are you serious?" Izuku asked breathlessly. "Yep. Got permission from the big boss. Just need your mom to sign a few permission forms." Mr. Murata smiled. I don't know what to say, thank you, sensei," was all Izuku could say in return. His night continued like normal, cleaning the empty labs and helping anyone who needed it. When he got home, he showed his mother the permission forms, and she was almost as excited as he was. "Oh, honey. You've grown so much, and now you're gonna grow even more," Inko cried. "I don't know, Mom, I'm still pretty short," Izuku countered, blushing at his mother's praise. "One step closer to you. One step closer to the future." One thing that began to become normal was the fact Izuku was not allowed to participate in the games his class played during gym class. Instead, their gym teacher forced Izuku to run laps around the yard while the class played games like soccer, basketball, sometimes even baseball. But Izuku was not allowed to participate. Within the last 2 months of school, Izuku's muscles and his bones had strengthened, and he was a lot faster than before. He was also building stamina, and he didn't know whether he should thank the teacher or not. They hadn't planned for Izuku to like the aftermath of his solitude, but Izuku couldn't help but like gaining muscle. Currently, Izuku was spending his lunch period at school like he normally did, alone in the corner of the schoolyard. The bullying from the beginning of last year had dwindled down to Izuku just being full-out ignored by his peers. He had gotten used to it, and kind of enjoyed not being pushed around as much, though he was still rather lonely. He still had Samuel and Melissa to talk to, but it wasn't the same as having friends to hang out with. He was eating his lunch his mom had prepared for him and writing down an idea in his book when a figure casted a shadow over the page. He looked up in horror to see Bakugo standing there and looking down at him. "You hi kaken?" Izuku said, though it came out as a question. Bakugo made a humph noise before sitting down next to him. "Just shut it and stay quiet, Deku. I want nothing but peace and silence," Bakugo demanded as he leaned against the fence with his eyes closed. Izuku stared at him in shock before shaking his head and continuing his work. He did his best to stay quiet and ignore the scary presence next to him. "My mom wanted me to invite someone to join us on our mountain climbing trip this weekend," Bakugo said out of the blue. "The others have been annoying the shit out of me, so if you want to come you better be at my house by 8 on Saturday." Bakugo stood about to leave till Izuku stopped him. "I am sorry, Kaken. I have my internship on Saturday. They are teaching me how to weld," Izuku said hesitantly, sad to turn down the opportunity of hanging out with his former best friend. "Pfft, whatever. We'll go on Sunday then. Same time, so don't be late," Bakugo said before leaving. Izuku was shocked at his attitude towards him. Bakugo was still rude and pushy like he was before, but he wasn't being mean to Izuku like he used to be. Keikaken? Izuku called out to the retreating figure. Bakugo turned to give him an annoyed look. Does this mean we can be friends again? Bakugo just stared back at him before turning away. Whatever, Deku. That wasn't a no. Izuku smiled as he watched Bakugo leave. This was a step forward in the right direction in winning back his old friend. He quickly grabbed his phone and sent his mom a quick text, telling her the news. His mother seemed to be just as excited as he was, though she didn't like how dangerous mountain climbing was. It had been years since Izuku had gone, the last time Bakugo had almost pushed Izuku off the mountain if it hadn't been for Mitsuki rounding the corner. Izuku grimaced at the memory, but smiled, having a feeling this time would be different. Izuku knew mountain climbing was Bakugo's favorite pastime, so it must mean something if he was inviting him. Izuku quickly packed his things after realizing the bell was about to ring, and rushed to his classroom. He said Bakugo was already seated at his desk, so were a few other students. Izuku took his place at the back of the class, setting up his math work. The rest of the school day was boring. Most of the things being taught in science were things he had already learned last year. He was also ahead in math, since he needed the extra skills when he worked on his physics course. Izuku sighed as he listened to his teacher talk about niches and habitats. When the day ended, Izuku made his way home. He was slightly surprised when Bakugo matched his step and walked next to him. He didn't say anything and just continued on his way, not wanting to upset the other. When they came up to the intersection where they would go their separate ways, Bakugo said a quiet later, Deku. And Izuku responded with an enthusiastic bye, Kaken. Izuku made his way to his apartment. When he opened the door, he was surprised to find a big red camper's bag in the hallway. There were also a pair of red hiking shoes that looked to be around his size. Oh, Izuku! Mitsuki just dropped those off for you. She is quite excited you'll be joining them on Sunday, his mother said with a warm, happy smile. Izuku smiled in return and began looking through the equipment. It seemed to mostly be second-hand, probably gear that Bakugo grew out of, but it would work for Izuku perfectly. Chapter 8. Izuku's lesson on welding went a lot better than he thought it would. He was slightly scared at first since he had seen how many sparks shot out when the tools were being used, but Mr. Murata assured him the protective gear would protect him as long as he wore it properly. They had started in the office, though, and had gone over the different motions and techniques of welding. At the end of the day, Mr. Murata let Izuku try out the circular motion technique. Izuku didn't do too bad at it, and was able to weld the two pieces of metal pretty well. When he got home, he went to his usual spot on the kitchen island to tell his mom all that he had learned during the day. Inko just smiled as she listened to her son go on and on about things she didn't understand. She was slightly surprised at hearing that Izuku was actually putting it into practice already. Having him learn how to sew last month was one thing, but this was a whole other in safety by comparison. Do you have everything packed for tomorrow? Inko asked, changing the subject before she died hearing about her son using dangerous equipment. Almost, I just need to pack extra clothing, just in case, Izuku responded, his head peering over the counter so he could see what his mother was cooking. His hand began to reach out like he was about to take something out of a bowl, and Inko shot around to slap his wrist. Well, you better go finish packing it then. I will finish supper, Inko said, faking an angry face. Izuku laughed as he made his way to his room. He packed an extra pair of jeans and looked for the most ridiculous shirt he had. Mitsuki Bakugo hated Izuku's t-shirts, but Izuku didn't care and quite enjoyed seeing her face when she read them. He finally found one that said spoon and put it in his bag. When he exited his room, supper was ready. He ate with his mother, listening to her go over her rules for tomorrow. Izuku listened to them knowing that his mother meant well in her worries. Unlike Bakugo, if Izuku fell he could not shoot himself back up. Don't worry, Mom, Izuku said, trying to calm her worries. I will be with Aunt Mitsuki the whole time, I promise. Izuku ate his breakfast quickly, excited to go mountain climbing with his old friend. Once he finished, he put his dishes in the sink and raced down the hall. Bye, Mom! he yelled as he put the big red camping bag over his shoulders. He put on the red hiking shoes and raced down the building's main staircase. When he finally made it to the Bakugo's house, he still had 15 minutes to spare. Izuku rang the doorbell and waited. "Izuku!" Mitsuki yelled as she embraced him. Izuku whined and tried to get away from the woman as she hugged him tightly and showered him in kisses on the cheeks. She finally let him go and took his bag off his shoulders. "I'll put this in the van. You go inside and help your Uncle Masaru pack the lunches." Izuku complied and ran into the kitchen to greet his uncle. He began helping pack the lunches into a cooler when Bakugo shot down the stairs. "Hurry up! Let's get going!" he yelled as he made his way to the front door. "You're the last one ready, you brat! Stop yelling!" Izuku heard his aunt outside. The two yelled at each other until Izuku and Masaru joined them in the van. Izuku hopped in the back next to Bakugo. The four made their way to the mountain climbing site. The ride was mostly quiet until Bakugo and Mitsuki began arguing over whose music they were going to play. Masaru turned in the driver's seat to smile at Izuku through the rear-view mirror. Izuku smiled back, accustomed to Bakugo's yelling from school, and enjoyed the rest of the trip. When they arrived, Bakugo and Masaru began getting the bags out of the trunk, while Mitsuki went over the basic with Izuku. The group then went to a moderate trail and made their way through the trees towards the mountain. Izuku did a lot better than he thought he would, though his legs had to make up for the lack of muscle in his arms. "Damn it, Deku!" Bakugo yelled after Izuku lost good gripping. "Gain some muscle in your arms, would ya?" "Easier said than done, Kaken. I'm only allowed to run during gym class," Izuku retorted. "Then get some dumbbells." "Like I have the money to go out and buy dumbbells." Bakugo just made a humph sound and continued climbing, helping Izuku here and there. Izuku listened to his instructions and when they made it to the top thanked him. "You don't have to thank me, you damn nerd," Bakugo drawled. Izuku thanked him again anyways and raised his hands up in surrender when Bakugo gave him a cold glare. "Come on, boys, time for lunch," Mitsuki called them. "1 second," Izuku called back. Taking his phone out, he walked up to Bakugo, who looked at him confused. Izuku wrapped his arm around his shoulders, pulled him next to him, and aimed the phone up high. The result was a photo of the two in front of the beautiful landscape. Izuku had a bright smile on his face while Bakugo had a small smirk, both of them looking at the camera. As Izuku looked at the photo, Bakugo grabbed his shirt and pulled him forward. "Show that to anyone outside our families and you're dead," Bakugo said before letting him go and joining his parents on the blanket. Izuku followed after him with a smile on his face. "Wouldn't dream of it, Kaken," he whispered. The following week went along well. Bakugo joined Izuku during lunch every other day, and the two of them would eat in silence. They also walked home together on the days Izuku didn't have his internship. On Friday, Izuku was about to continue towards his house when Bakugo grabbed the back of his shirt. "This way, nerd," Bakugo said, pulling Izuku towards his house. Izuku flailed a little until Bakugo let him go, and he continued to follow him down the streets. It didn't take them long to arrive at the house, and Izuku shouted out a hello to his aunt and uncle before following Bakugo to his room. "What are you doing, Kaken?" Izuku asked as Bakugo grabbed a bin out from under his bed. Bakugo handed the bin over, and when Izuku tried to hold it, he almost dropped it from the weight. "Careful, dumbass," Bakugo said, taking the bin back from Izuku. "They're my old dumbbells. They are too light for me, so you can have them." "Are really? I can have them? Are you sure?" Izuku rambled as he looked over the equipment Bakugo was offering him. "Were you not listening, Deku? I said they're yours," Bakugo said before closing the lid. "Grab that side, dumbass." Izuku did as told, and the two walked back to Izuku's apartment with the giant bin in tow. When they entered the apartment, Inko gushed over Bakugo. She was so happy to see the two old friends together again. Bakugo helped Izuku drop the bin off in his room. "Tell your parents that we should have dinner together sometime, alright, Katsuki?" Inko said as she and Izuku walked Bakugo to the door. Bakugo nodded and gave his aunt Inko a peck on the cheek before leaving. The two families ended up having dinner together at the Midoriya residence on Sunday. They all agreed that it should occur once a month, taking turns hosting. By the time Izuku's second year of middle school ended, he had improved in many categories. Izuku's knowledge in the sciences was beyond that of a middle schooler. Him and Bakugo began training together, Izuku for fun and Bakugo to be a better hero, so he had grown quite fit. He had mastered the basics of sewing, welding, woodwork, though he wasn't sure if he would use that one, and computer programming. His relationship with Bakugo was strong again, and he was still in contact with his international friends as well. Overall, the year was a success, and Izuku was excited to begin creating prototypes of his ideas so he could become a student at his dream school, UA. 2 months into his final year of middle school, Izuku had plenty of ideas for support items, but no idea which one he would choose. He had one design of a grappling hook that could emit electricity to shock any unwanted interruptions while a hero was trying to move freely. He also had a design for a device that could send out sound waves and sense heat signals through thick lumber. Izuku could think of many ways this could help heroes. Finding lost victims in the rubble, finding villains in an empty building. The possibilities were endless. No matter how much Izuku tried, he couldn't pick which one to build. As Bakugo sat down next to him during lunch, Izuku quickly handed him his Support Research Volume 5. "Pick one, please," he said as Bakugo hesitantly took the book. "I can't choose which one to build and send to UA for my application." Bakugo looked down at the many designs Izuku was considering. "Then make more than one, dumbass," Bakugo said before handing the book back to him. "Whichever one works the best by the end of the year you send in. Honestly, how can you be so stupid yet smart at the same time?" Izuku's face lit up at the idea. "That's genius, Kaken," he praised. "I know," Bakugo retorted. Izuku smiled at his friends and began choosing which ones he wanted to build first. He decided to build the rescue device first, the grappling hook second, and his design for anti-gravity shoes last. The 3 designs were the most thoroughly planned out, and Izuku felt confident in all 3. "Thank you, Kaken," Izuku said once more as lunch ended. "Whatever, nerd," was all he got in return as they made their way to class. The rest of the school day seemed to go painfully slow as Izuku squirmed in his seat. Mr. Murata had gotten Izuku permission to build his prototypes using company equipment and supplies. The CEO liked what he saw in Izuku, so he didn't hesitate to agree to the request, as long as he was supervised, of course. When the final bell rang and Izuku's freedom was announced, he raced out of the school and made his way to the company building. Mr. Murata was waiting at the front desk and looked excited to see Izuku when he arrived. "Did you decide which one you'll be making?" the man asked Izuku. Izuku nodded. "I'm actually hoping to make 3 by the end of the year, starting with the rescue sensor," Izuku replied. "How ambitious. Well, let's get to it. I'm guessing you already have a list of equipment and materials you need?" Mr. Murata asked. Izuku held up his notebook in response. "Great, let's get to it." The majority of the evening, Izuku spent his time programming a microchip so that the device would recognize any abnormalities in structures, people, and bombs. By the end of the night, the microchip was ready to be tested, and Mr. Murata promised he would test it himself by the time Izuku would arrive the next day. While Izuku was packing his bag, he stopped and looked up at his old teacher. "Thank you, Mr. Murata, for everything," Izuku said. Mr. Murata turned to him and smiled. "You don't have to thank me, Midoriya. I'm glad to help the future generation, and I can already tell that you'll be a very popular costume designer in the future." Izuku smiled at the man's words. While he enjoyed the basics of designing support items, it was no secret that he was more passionate about the designs of hero costumes. Izuku finished packing his things and made his way home, excited to find out what his mother would have ready for supper. Chapter 9. It took Izuku a little over a month to finish the final prototype of his rescue device, which he decided to name Signal Catcher. He was hesitant with the name, but it needed one. He was glad the final product was finished after many complications in making it. Izuku now truly understood just how frustrating it was when something didn't quite work as planned. Mr. Murata had laughed at Izuku on many occasions when the device didn't catch the heat signals he had set up. Apparently Izuku's face was very cute when he got mad, and that only made Izuku more embarrassed. Eventually all the bugs were fixed and Izuku was ready to move on to his next prototype. The grappling hook would be much easier to build since he could use the design of a regular grappling hook and just add the parts needed for it to emit electricity. Izuku had to quickly find a way so that only the wire would shock you. That way the hero holding it wouldn't be in any danger. With a little bit of research, Izuku quickly found a material he could replace the metal body of the grappling hook with. The material was pretty well used for heroes with an electric quirk, so it wasn't too hard to get a hold of. By the end of the next month, Izuku had finished the grappling hook prototype. Izuku was much happier with the second prototype than he was the first. It hadn't come with as many bugs to fix like the programming part of the signal catcher did. The third design proved to be the most difficult though. Izuku had to do so much extra research so that he could completely understand the science before trying to build his anti-gravity shoes. His design focused more on allowing the wearer to build up energy whenever they walked or ran. Later they would be able to focus the energy in the shoes so that they could shoot themselves in the air, almost like they were defying gravity. There were many safety concerns, like how they would stop themselves from plummeting down to the ground at a fast pace. Izuku worked out that they could have a remote to control when the energy would be used and to also control turbo jets at the bottom of the shoes for safe landing. When the safety issues were finally worked out, Izuku was finally able to design what the shoes would look like. He decided to make them look like his red hiking shoes. They ended up a little bulkier, like his sneakers, but were still close enough. Mr. Murata had let him test them out since he had made them in his own shoe size, which he definitely did not do on purpose. Izuku had a blast testing out the shoes. The first time, however, was when he found out they needed a way for the user to control how much energy they used in a single jump. Since Izuku jumped so high he smacked his head on the ceiling. His mother was not happy at the fact her son got a concussion and almost fractured his skull. Izuku was able to add a control mechanism quite easily though. There was now only 4 months left until the written entrance exam at UA and Izuku was studying like crazy. Since he had 3 prototypes all ready to go, he didn't need to focus on them as much and had a lot more time to study. He only visited the company every other Saturday so that they could take on another intern who needed the experience more than he did. Currently Izuku was sprawled out on Bakugo's bed, both of them studying for the UA entrance exam. The two had agreed that they would help each other study. No matter how much Bakugo hated to admit it, Izuku knew a lot more about science than he did. It was the only subject Bakugo struggled even a little in. In return, Bakugo helped Izuku with Japanese literature. "Oh, Deku," Bakugo called from the floor. "I need your help with something." Izuku turned from his spot to look at him. "Is it another one of those chemical equations?" Izuku asked as he got up from his spot. "No, dumbass. It's about a support item I might need," Bakugo drawled. Izuku made a surprised face that quickly turned into an excited one. "You want me to make you a support item?" Izuku asked excitedly. He quickly sat down next to Bakugo on the floor, bringing his notebook and a pencil along with him. "Well, yeah, I don't know how it would work exactly," Bakugo said, rubbing the back of his head and leaning on the side of the bed. "But that's for you to figure out, I guess." "Sure thing, Kaken," Izuku said. "What do you need?" Bakugo looked slightly hesitant. It was no secret he hated admitting he needed help, so Izuku didn't push him and instead waited till he was ready. "Right now, my quirk is limited to the amount of sweat on my hands. I need a way to conserve extra sweat so I can use it all at once," Bakugo said, looking over at Izuku. "Figure out a way to make that happen." Izuku wrote down Bakugo's request on a blank page, then looked up at him. "Well, maybe you could have something on both of your wrists that had a heater you could turn on," Izuku said, picking up one of Bakugo's arms and examining it. "It could have some sort of tank for your sweat. We would have to close it off from your hand though so that you don't accidentally explode it. Maybe we can add a few things so it will only shoot outwards and you can aim it with your hands." "You're mumbling, you idiot," Bakugo said before taking his arm back. "Make them look like grenades, it suits my quirk." "Grenades," Izuku said while holding his chin? "That's it. We can have a pin you pulled to release the sweat for you to ignite. But that would mean you can only use it twice in one battle. Is that okay?" "It's fine, this is only until my quirk gets stronger," Bakugo said, standing up and stretching his limbs. You better get them done before the entrance exam. I want to test them so I'll know if I need to add it to my costume request sheet when I get in. I'll have them ready, don't worry. Izuku smiled as he scribbled down his ideas. You'll show me your hero costume design, right? I want to be the first to see it. Whatever, just get out of my room, Bakugo said before falling back on his bed. Izuku quickly packed his things and left, saying a quick goodbye to Bakugo's parents before heading home. Izuku's teacher was mumbling about something to do with the differences of American English and British English. Izuku was too excited to pay attention, though. After school, Izuku would be bringing Bakugo to his internship so he could try out the grenadier bracers he had built for him. Izuku was quite proud of the support items. He was especially proud of the name, which he thought was pretty good. When the bell finally rang, Izuku quickly packed his things and looked up to see Bakugo standing in front of him impatiently. It seemed he was also excited to see them in action. The two left the school and headed towards Masuda and company. These things better not destroy my hands, Deku, Bakugo said as they entered the building. Izuku began leading Bakugo to Lab B, which Bakugo hated. He was always the one leading the way and hated following others. They won't, Kaken, Izuku said. At least try to have faith in me. Izuku went to the drawer where he kept the gauntlets and handed them to Bakugo. Try them on and start storing your sweat. We have to wait for supervision before you can try a blast. Bakugo took the gauntlets from Izuku and put them on his wrists. He switched on the heater since he wasn't in the mood to do any exercises to make him sweat. Mr. Murata arrived not too long after them. Ready to try a blast? The man asked, and Bakugo gave him a wicked grin. I'll take that as a yes. Come this way. Mr. Murata led Bakugo to the corner of the room where they had a giant weighted tarp ready to take the blast. You don't have to use your hands to aim like I originally planned, Izuku began. You don't even have to ignite it yourself. Once this pin is out, it will ignite all by itself. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find a way for you to control how much you use dash. I plan on using it all or not at all, Deku, Bakugo interrupted. And I don't plan on holding back. At least be careful not to use it on your classmates, Kaken, Izuku begged. He didn't get a response as Bakugo lifted his right arm and pulled out the pin. A massive explosion shot out and blew the two back a little. Bakugo smiled and did the same with his left gauntlet. Me like, was all Bakugo said as he stared at them. I'm glad you like them, they're actually what I decided to send in for my UA application, Izuku said with a smile. Now pass them over, I gotta reset them so I can send them in tomorrow. Bakugo hesitantly returned the gauntlets and watched Izuku as he reset them. He was hoping he could learn to reset them himself, but after seeing Izuku get out a specific tool he knew he would probably need help to do so. When Izuku finished resetting them, he walked to the end of the room and put them in a big duffel bag. What's all in there? Bakugo asked as he walked towards him. These are all the things I've built so far, Izuku said as he smiled proudly. And since this is my last day here, I'm bringing them all home. Bakugo nodded in response. Next week UA would be hosting the entrance exams for all middle school students applying to UA. The Hero Course entrance exams would begin on Monday and continue until Wednesday. The Business Course exam would be held on Thursday, Support on Friday and General on Saturday. Bakugo would be a part of the Monday exam, so he only had 4 days to do his final studying. Hand me a strap, nerd. I need to get back to studying, said Bakugo as he offered out his hand. Izuku handed him one of the straps and the two made their way to Izuku's apartment. Mom! Kaken is here! Can he join us for supper? Izuku called as they entered the apartment. Of course. We're having homemade sushi, Inko called back from the kitchen. The boys went into Izuku's room and dropped off the bag. Bakugo quickly made his way to Izuku's desk to check out the new Almight action figure Izuku had gotten. This one wasn't released recently, was it? Bakugo asked as he looked over. No, I actually already have that one, but it was a farewell gift from the scientists and engineers at Masuda and Company, so I don't mind having a second, Izuku said with a smile. Bakugo responded with a humph before pulling out his science notes. Okay, nerd, you have 2 hours to explain this shit to me. Chapter 10. It was while Bakugo was taking the entrance exam and 4 days before Izuku was scheduled to take his that Izuku realized a flaw in his plan. He had no way to demonstrate the grenadier bracers without Bakugo being there. There was the option of him taking a jar of Bakugo's sweat with him, but there were many problems with that idea. One being that it was absolutely disgusting, and two, how the hell would he convince Bakugo to give him his sweat? Izuku's gears were turning at an alarming rate in his mind as he tried to think of what to do. Eventually his mother caught him pacing mid-panic attack and calmed him down. "Call the school, see if you can bring Katsuki in for your demonstration." Honestly, what would he do without his mother? Izuku found the school's number online and gave it a quick call. It didn't take long before someone answered. "Yui line, Hound Dog speaking." Izuku froze as the hero's voice entered his ears. He stood there stunned before hearing. Hello? Anyone there?" Sorry, sir. I wasn't expecting a hero is all." Izuku flushed, beet red as he answered. "Only heroes work at UA. It's what we're known for. Now how may I help you?" Hound Dog asked. "Right, well, I'm taking the support entrance exam and I realize that may have an issue with my prototype demonstration," Izuku answered. "Listen, if you don't have it finished we can't do anything, kid. You knew this before applying." "And no, it's not that. You see, my prototype is a support item I made specifically for my friend who is applying for the hero's course. I can't exactly demonstrate it without him and his quirk." Izuku rushed. "Oh, you made it specifically for him?" Hound Dog asked, sounding surprised. "Yes, sir," Izuku confirmed nervously. I've never heard of an applicant with a support item made for a specific person. What's your name?" "Izuku Midoriya," Izuku quickly stated. Here you are. Okay, have your friend come with you on Friday. We'll have him stay in one of the classes while you write the written portion." "Awesome, thank you. Oh, and one more thing. It would probably be safest if the demonstration was held outside," Izuku said hesitantly. He didn't want to risk Bakugo damaging any private property. "Now you've really caught my attention. I'm gonna have to join in on this one. Okay, I wrote a note for Principal Nedzu and Power Loader. See you on Friday, kid," Hound Dog said before ending the call. Izuku's nerves lessened immediately. "Now to tell Kaken," Izuku muttered. He waited a couple hours until he knew Bakugo would be home. Pulling out his phone, he messaged his friend. "Hey Kaken! How did the exam go?" Izu 2136. "The practical exam was easy as shit. Expected better from UA. Bakuhiro 1111. I'm guessing it went well then." Izu 2136. "No shit, dumbass. Bakuhiro 1111. Okay, well, anyways, I need you to come to UA with me for my prototype demonstration. I already called and got to talk to Hound Dog. He said it was alright and that you could stay in one of the classrooms while I write the written portion." Izu 2136. "You got to talk on the phone with Hound Dog? Why didn't you start with that, you damn nerd?" Bakuhiro 1111. "Sorry. I wanted to know how your exam went." Izu 2136. "Whatever, I'll come as long as I get to blow shit up." Bakuhiro 1111. "That's pretty much the whole demonstration." Izu 2136. "Good, I gotta go. The old hag is calling me." Bakuhiro 1111. "Say hi to Aunt Mitsuki for me." Izu 2136. "Whatever." Bakuhiro 1111. Izuku walked into the UA gates, following Bakugo to the main office. He was called the day prior by Hound Dog and told to arrive 30 minutes prior to the written exam. They apparently didn't want to make Bakugo sit in a classroom for a few hours. Izuku was amazed that he was walking inside UA and did his very best to memorize everything he saw. They were quick to find the main office and saw Hound Dog and a group of other pro heroes standing there. All of them had a mug with either coffee or tea inside. It seems they're here. A small animal that looked like a bear? No, dog? Mouse? Izuku didn't know. "Hello, I am Principal Nedzu. Are you ready to demonstrate your prototype, Midoriya?" "Why, yes, sir," Izuku responded, slightly embarrassed since he stuttered. Wonderful, I hope you don't mind, but a few extra teachers showed interest in seeing your demonstration, so they will be joining us. Let's head to Ground Beta, shall we? Principal Nedza led the way to Ground Beta. It was a large area of land that had many buildings mimicking a city. Izuku followed the principal and tried to ignore the whispers behind him coming from some of the pro-heroes. He recognized them all, of course. There was Hound Dog and Power Loader, the only two he was expecting to see. Midnight, Present Mike 13, who waved at Izuku when she saw him looking, and Cementos. Izuku didn't know if he felt more relaxed or more pressured at their presence. The principal finally stopped in the middle of an intersection and turned to Izuku. Alright, we'll let you set up and then you can introduce your prototype. Please include what it is supposed to help with, what it does, and anything else you would like to add, he said before joining the teachers. Izuku placed his case on the ground and handed Bakugo the gauntlets. Bakugo put them on and quickly turned on the heater so it would start absorbing his sweat. I think I'm ready, sir, Izuku said, turning to face the teachers. Once they were all looking at him, he continued. My name is Izuku Midoriya, from Aldera Junior High. The prototype I have chosen to show you is a support item I built for my friend Bakugo. His quick is called Explosion. His sweat has nitroglycerin which he can ignite, but it is dependent on how much sweat he has on his hands. With the help of my support item, the Grenadier Bracers, he can store his sweat inside. Izuku continued, motioning to the gauntlets. There is a heater inside both gauntlets he can turn on when he is not doing any physical activity so he can still store sweat. When the tank is full, he can pull the pin on the top of the gauntlet to release an enormous blast. Looking at the teachers, Izuku saw a lot of interested looks. Well, at least I know I have their attention. Wonderful, may we see it in action? Principal Nedzu asked. Izuku nodded and turned to Bakugo. Try not to do too much damage, Kaken, Izuku told him as Bakugo walked toward a vacant car. Don't worry, anything he destroys can be easily replaced, the principal said, which only added to the fire in Bakugo's eyes. Bakugo aimed his right arm towards the car and pulled out the pin. A giant explosion sent the car flying into a nearby building, creating a giant hole in the side. The car was ruined and burned as smoke and fire danced around where it had been. Izuku turned to see the teachers' reactions and was proud to see three emotions running through some of their faces. Excitement in the eyes of the principal and Midnight, awe in the eyes of Power Loader and Hound Dog, and fear in the eyes of Cementos and Present Mike. Izuku couldn't quite tell what expression 13 had, though. Well, that was truly extraordinary, Principal Nedza said. Bakugo passed the gauntlets back to Izuku, and he began to reset his right gauntlet. Well, let's get you to the site of the written exam. Thank you, Bakugo, for helping in the demonstration. Bakugo left the school and Izuku made his way to the giant lecture hall where the written exam would be held. He wasn't the first one there, unlike he had expected. Many people his age scattered the room in their assigned seats. Izuku quickly made his way up the stairs to his row and sat next to a boy with dirty blonde hair. He was about to introduce himself, but stopped when the boy gave him a cold glare. Okay, leave him be, I guess. Izuku waited in silence until he saw Present Mike take the stage. The pro-hero excitedly introduced the exam while it was being handed out. The rules were like any other school exam. If you cheated, your application would be thrown out, and you only had the set time to write the exam. At the beginning, Izuku was too panicked to focus on much else than getting as much information down as he could. When he finally looked up at the time, he realized he had plenty. He began to slow down, taking more time to think about the questions. He started with the subjects he was most confident in. The science portion was easy and Izuku flew through it. The math portion had a few difficult questions, but he was able to work through them. Thanks to Melissa and Samuel, Izuku didn't struggle too much in the foreign languages portions. Japanese literature was a little harder, but Izuku just tried to imagine Bakugo's yelling in the background and hoped he had done alright in it. By the time it was over, Izuku had gotten the chance to go over most of the questions. He had rushed over to add a little to them. He was happy with how he had done and tried to not think back to it too much. He knew it would be at least 1 or 2 weeks until he would hear back. In the meantime, he had 1 more week of middle school to finish. Izuku rushed home, excited to tell his mother how he had done. When he entered the apartment, he saw 3 extra pairs of shoes. "Aunt Mitsuki!" Izuku yelled as he ran into her arms. "Izuku! How did it go?" "Katsuki won't spill," Mitsuki said as she smiled at Izuku before sending a glare in Bakugo's direction. "I think it went well. The teachers seemed pretty impressed by the gauntlets and Kaken's quirk," Izuku began. "And the written exam was a lot easier than I thought it would be. The science portion was so easy I finished it before dash." Okay. Slow down there. Come sit with me and tell me that again, a little slower this time," Mitsuki joked as she ushered Izuku to the couch. Izuku restated what he said at a normal pace, his mother and uncle listening from the kitchen as Bakugo sprawled himself on the armchair. "Well, it's a good thing we came over to celebrate," Masaru said as he helped Inko with dinner. "We can't celebrate yet. We don't even know if we got in," Izuku argued. He heard a sound come from Bakugo's direction. "Maybe you don't, but I definitely did," Bakugo stated. Mitsuki threw the closest object, which just so happened to be a pillow, at her son. Bakugo glared at her before throwing another one back. Izuku left the couch as the two began yelling at each other as they threw pillows left and right. He sat at the island, watching his mother and uncle cook. He would help if there wasn't a chance of him burning the building down. Izuku was fine with doing prep work like cutting vegetables, but he was terrible at everything else. It was just better to leave it to the pros. When Bakugo and Mitsuki were finally done yelling at each other, supper was ready. The 5 of them gathered around the table and enjoyed the home-cooked meal. The conversation leapt from work to Almight to school, everyone getting the chance to add something here and there. Izuku smiled as he looked around the table. "These people believe in me. They're my very own support team," he thought. His thinking was interrupted by Bakugo and Mitsuki getting into another shouting match over Bakugo's manners. Izuku laughed as Inko and Masaru shook their heads at the two. Chapter 11. Izuku's time at Aldera Middle School finally came to an end. He didn't really care too much for the school since the teachers were awful towards him, so he wouldn't really miss it. He left the school gates with Bakugo, and they made their way home. Bakugo had received his admission letter from Yae yesterday, and Izuku had been 10 times more excited than Bakugo was. "I'm the one who got in, dumbass. Calm down," was all Bakugo said as Izuku almost cried tears of joy for his friend. "Hey Kaken," Izuku said, breaking the silence that had fallen over the two. "What is it, nerd?" Bakugo asked, sounding annoyed. What if I don't get into UA? Will we still be friends?" Izuku asked, looking over to see Bakugo was looking at him like he was being more stupid than normal. "You're an idiot. Our parents still host annual dinners. Plus, even if you do get in, we won't be hanging out as much, so it doesn't really matter. I gotta focus on the hero course and you'll have your own stuff to do," Bakugo replied. They continued on their way, Izuku considering what he had just said. "Are you saying that even if we both make it in we won't be as close as friends?" Izuku asked hesitantly. "Listen, Deku," Bakugo started. "We'll still be friends, but we're not gonna be hanging out with each other during lunch or at school. That's all. We're still friends, just not at school." "Why not at school, Kaken?" Izuku asked, slightly afraid of the answer. Is it because I'm quirkless?" The question came as a surprise to Bakugo, and he turned to his friend. "No! You damn nerd! I'll just be busy training, you idiot!" Bakugo yelled. "You'll have friends from the support course, stop your worrying." Izuku followed Bakugo's orders and dropped the subject. They parted ways and Izuku continued on his way home. When he arrived, he quickly changed his shoes and entered the apartment to show his mother on the couch staring at the coffee table. "Mom?" Izuku called, getting his mother's attention. She turned and gave him a scared, but excited look. "A letter came," his mother said. "It's for you from Yae." Izuku froze in his spot and looked over at the coffee table to see a white envelope. He slowly made his way over and sat next to his mother, staring at the envelope. The two sat there silently, both slightly afraid." his mother finally said. "The letter is for you, so you better open it." Izuku gulped as he reached out to pick up the envelope. He hesitated like it might attack him if he moved too quickly. He picked it up and brought it closer to his chest. He quickly looked over at his mother for one more encouraging look before opening the envelope. He dropped the contents onto the coffee table to see a small circular device. Izuku was about to pick up the device when a screen suddenly shot out and Power Loader was displayed. "Hello, Izuku Midoriya," Power Loader said. "I hope this letter finds you well. First, I'd like to just say that you did extremely well in the written entrance exam. You had the second best overall mark in all of the support course applicants. We are used to said applicants doing well in the science and math portions of the exam, but you exceed expectations in all categories. Well done." Izuku watched the display like a hawk as Power Loader continued to speak. Suddenly a screen behind him lit up and video footage of his prototype demonstration played. Inko gasped as she watched Bakugo explode the car and gave her son a small glare. "As for your support gear prototype, Grenadier Bracers," Power Loader continued, "the whole group of teachers, including myself and Principal Nedzu, were impressed at the power of the weapons. Not only were they able to contain the blast in a certain direction, but they didn't take any damage from it as well. The fact that it was specifically made for someone was an added bonus in my book, since it is the job of support scientists and support engineers to customize items for their clients' needs." Izuku watched as 2 scores showed up on the screen, replacing the footage. "Your written exam score came out as 187 to 200 and your mark on your support gear was a perfect 10 out of 10. With that being said, I would hereby like to announce that you, Izuku Midoriya, have been accepted in the support course at UA. I am excited to get the chance to teach you this spring. Have a wonderful day." The device turned off and Izuku and Inko stared at the empty space before both of them bursted into tears. "Oh, Izuku! I'm so proud of you!" Inko cried as she embraced her son. Izuku sat frozen with silent tears of joy falling down his face. I made it into UA." After a celebratory dinner with his mother, Izuku rushed to his room to share the news with his friends. Bakugo's response was a simple cool, but Melissa's and Samuel's reactions were much better. "Congratulations, Izuku! I knew you could do it!" Mel 1910. "That's amazing, Izuku! How did you get such a high score on the written exam?" Sammy 8245. "It's thanks to you guys for helping me with English and Spanish." Isa 2136. "I'm sure that's not true, you studied hard for that exam." Sammy 8245. "I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be sharing this information, but Uncle Might will also be at UA. He got a teacher's position." Mel 1910. "Are you serious? I'm gonna be in the same building as Almight all day at school." Isa 2136. "Yeah, it's not like you had dinner with him or anything like that." Sammy 8245. "Hey! This is still a big deal." Isa 2136. Izuku smiled at his phone as he talked with his friends. Still reeling with the information Melissa had shared and the fact that he was accepted to UA. "I wonder why All Might decided to start teaching well. He is getting up there in age, maybe he wants to retire." Izuku frowned at the idea, but knew it was very likely. Heroes can't work forever. It was a hard and demanding job. Most heroes retire and start teaching to keep themselves occupied. Some even teach full-time and do hero work part-time to relieve the stress of the job, which was the case for the majority of teachers at UA. It took Izuku a long time to fall asleep that night. His brain wouldn't shut off and he kept thinking about what it would be like at UA, his dream school. He finally dozed off sometime in the early morning, dreaming about making friends and talking to his favorite heroes. Izuku and Bakugo decided not to travel to school together. Well, actually Bakugo decided for the two. Izuku was okay with that since it let him decide his own schedule. Since he was no longer running laps in gym class every day, Izuku got into the habit of waking up early to go on morning runs through his neighborhood. During his runs, Izuku always looked around for inspiration in his next prototype. He hadn't been able to build anything since his internship had ended, so he was extra excited for the chance to build something new at school. After Izuku finished his run, he quickly showered and started to get dressed in the uniform they had sent him. To Izuku's demise, a red tie was included in the uniform. Izuku watched 4 different YouTube videos in the days prior and was still unable to do it correctly. He was finally able to get something that sort of looked like a tie. But it was small and bulky, so it wasn't going to be the best looking one at school. Izuku couldn't care less at that point, and was just happy it was tied around his neck. He ate breakfast with his mother, listening to her rant about how he was to listen to everything his teachers told him. She especially focused on making sure he understood he was no longer allowed to make any weapons like he had for Bakugo without her permission. Thinking about it, Izuku knew he wasn't going to tell her when he was planning to make one. It would just make her worry, and he knew he would be under the supervision of Power Loader when he would be building it, so he was completely safe. He quickly finished his breakfast and left the apartment carrying his big duffel bag of prototypes with him. He made his way to the train station and boarded with little difficulty. He was still early, so there weren't too many people on board. He gently set his bag down in front of him and looked out the window as the scenery changed from city to city. When he finally arrived at Mistreated, a lot more people were roaming the stations, either on their way to work or to school. He jumped off the train and followed his mental map to the school. He was surprised to see that reporters had lined the entry gate to the school and seemed to be stopping students to interview them. Izuku dodged them and tried to make a beeline straight into the gates before he was stopped by an overenthusiastic microphone being shoved in his face. "Have you heard Almight will be teaching at your school? Are you excited to have him as a possible teacher? Are you in the hero course?" Question after question was asked, and Izuku was never able to answer any before the next came. The reporter finally stopped and looked at Izuku expectantly. "I have heard Almight was coming to teach at UA, but I am in the support course, so I doubt he'll be teaching me," Izuku said before plowing past the reporter. His bag was getting heavier by the second and he did not want to accidentally drop it. When he made it through the gates, he saw the excitement of students did not change. He made his way towards the hall dedicated for first-year students, passing by many older students who had stopped to talk to their friends. When Izuku was about to enter the building, he noticed a girl with pink hair struggling to carry an even bigger duffel bag than Izuku's. Walking up to the girl, Izuku lifted the other end of the bag. The girl let out a surprised yelp as the bag became lighter, and she almost fell back. "Sorry!" Izuku yelled. "I saw you might need some help, so I thought I'd give you a hand." The girl looked up and displayed her green-yellow eyes and a bright smile. "Thank you. My babies are quite heavy," the girl exclaimed excitedly. "You are babies?" Izuku asked, slightly confused. "My inventions," the girl replied, smiling even brighter and getting in Izuku's face. "My inventions are my most prized possessions, so don't drop them." Even though it should sound like a threat, the girl said it so happily that Izuku just took it as an order. "Oh, are you in the support course too?" Izuku asked as they began walking into the first year's hall. "I am too. I'm in class 1H. The girl turned around and got very close to Izuku's face, making the boy blush. "Me too," she exclaimed before turning and leading him down the hall. Their classroom was the 4th classroom they came to. The two entered to see that they were the first to arrive, and Power Loader sat at the desk in the front of the room. "Ah, the early birds get the worm," Power Loader said as he stood from his seat. "You two are exceedingly early, over an hour to be exact." Sorry, sir," Izuku said, showing his bag. "I didn't want to carry this on one of the busy trains." "Me neither," the girl exclaimed. Izuku realized right then that he did not know the girl's name, and that he had failed to introduce himself as well. "There's always at least one student with loads of stuff already made," Power Loader said excitedly. "This year it seems I've got 2. There are storage units at the back with names on them. Find yours and put them in there for now." The two made their way to the back, Izuku following the girl. She seemed to have found her unit since she started putting her bag down. Izuku followed and slowly put it down, being as gentle as he could. She seemed to be thankful for that. "I forgot to introduce myself earlier," Izuku said, standing awkwardly as the girl began to put her things inside. "My name is Izuku Midoriya " "Nice to meet you, Izuku-kun," the girl exclaimed. Izuku slightly reeled back at the sudden nickname she had already given him. "My name is Mei Hatsum." Call me Mei-chan if you'd like, she said before getting close to Izuku's face again. Is that all right? Izuku flushed red and nodded quickly. Girl. Pretty girl close to me. Izuku made his way over to where he found his storage unit and put the whole bag inside, deciding to leave the gadgets in the bag. He then looked back at the chalkboard at the front of the room to see where his assigned seat would be. He quickly found that he was seated next to Mei at the left-hand side of the front row. He smiled and sat down at his desk. Mei arrived shortly after. So Mei-chan, where are you from? Izuku asked, trying to fill in the time they had before class would actually begin. Mei looked over at him and rested her head on her hand as she smiled. Kyoto Prefecture, and yourself, Izuku-in? She responded excitedly. Shizuoka Prefecture, Izuku said, trying to fight the blush off his face. Cool, she said before leaning in closely. Now tell me about your babies. Chapter 12. Izuku and Mei spent the next hour before class talking about their current prototypes. By the time other students filled the room, the two had already become fast friends. Power Loader seemed to watch them with interest, especially when they were talking about one of their prototypes. Okay, it is time for class to begin. Power Loader boomed over the loud classroom. I am Power Loader, but you may call me Mr. Higuri and I will be your homeroom teacher as well as your engineering teacher. This classroom is where you will spend your time learning the common subjects of high school. However, there is a lab down the hall where you will get to put your ideas to the test and build some prototypes. Izuku listened excitedly as Mr. Higuri continued. He explained that he would only be with them during homeroom and engineering. Midnight would be their modern hero art history teacher, Present Mike for English, Cementos for modern literature, and Ectoplasm for math. Izuku grew more and more excited at the chance to learn from so many pro heroes. The morning went by rather fast. They mostly got the chance to get to know their teachers and fellow students, but everyone else in the class seemed hesitant when it came to Izuku and Mei. Though he tried to talk to some of them, they didn't seem to want to talk to him. Izuku ignored it though, since he was used to that behavior towards him. His best guess was that it had to do with him, and Mei being the only ones with more than one prototype built. They were probably thinking they had somehow cheated the system. Talking to Mei, Izuku found out that her uncle was a support engineer, and she had an internship with him. Some of the other students glared at them when they spoke about their internship experiences in between classes. When lunch came, Izuku quickly made his way to the cafeteria. He was excited to see Lunch Rush preparing food in front of a group of students. He got into line and waited patiently behind a tall boy with dark blue hair and a girl slightly shorter than him with shoulder-length brown hair. Izuku tried to guess what program they were in. I think Mr. Aizawa is a bit odd, but he's got to be good if he teaches at Yui, right? The girl said. Mr. Aizawa, that's Eraserhead. Bakugo is in that class too. They're in the hero course. Izuku tried his best to keep his cool. He was in a school taught by heroes. He shouldn't gush over students his age just because they want to be heroes in the future. He followed down the line and picked up a tray of food, paying for it at the end. Turning to look around the cafeteria, he saw plenty of students from his class sitting at one table. As he made his way to sit with them, the seat was blocked by one of their bags. Sorry Midoriya, but this seat is being saved, his classmate said hesitantly. It's okay, Izuku responded, sending him a small smile. Nothing new here. Izuku considered going back to the classroom where Mei would be, polishing her babies. At least then he could have company? As Izuku made his way to leave, he saw Bakugo at a large table surrounded by who he assumed were his classmates. One redhead was rather brave and put his arm around Bakugo, which caused an uproar from him. Izuku laughed quietly and left the cafeteria. At least Kaken has plenty of people around him. Making his way into the classroom, Izuku saw Mei in the back polishing a pair of goggles. He walked up to her and sat down on the floor. He began to eat while he watched Mei carefully polish the lenses. I thought you were going to eat in the CAF with the rest of the class, Mei commented, looking up from her work. I was, but they didn't seem to like the idea, Izuku replied. Mei made a humph noise before continuing her work. It's ridiculous they don't like us because we had internships before coming here, Mei said as she put her things away. I thought it was part of the business, to learn as much as possible when you can. I guess they just didn't have the opportunities we did. Izuku shrugged before offering her some of his lunch. Mei gladly took some and they continued to eat in silence. Hey, I was gonna ask. Mei began. Your name sounds really familiar, why is that? Oh. I was Japan's representative for the hero costume design contest 4 years ago, could be that, Izuku said, blushing and looking down. But don't tell the rest of the class that. More reasons for them to not like me. I remember now, Mei exclaimed. You got to visit the island. How was it? Was it as cool as they make it seem? How many babies did you get to watch be tested? If it weren't for the fact that Izuku was now used to her speech, the last question would have been very frightening. Izuku answered her questions about the island and the two finished Izuku's lunch rather quickly. Leaving the room, the two walked back to the cafeteria to return the tray. Upon their arrival, Izuku saw one of his classmates being yelled at by Bakugo. Bakugo's shirt was drenched in pink juice and his classmate looked terrified of him. All of Bakugo's classmates were holding him back from exploding the poor kid. Izuku ignored the group and returned his tray to Lunch Rush, knowing Bakugo would not take things too far. Bakugo knew he could not risk getting suspended or expelled for hurting another student. Izuku and Hatsum made their way back to class and took their assigned seats while talking about what they may be doing during next period. Teacher's Lounge. I have a predicament, Mr. Higuri said as he entered the room. The rest of the teachers turned to him. What is it? Another star student causing you trouble? Midnight asked as she spun in her chair. 2 of them, actually. One slightly quiet and polite while the other is loud and bold, he answered, sitting down on the couch. The 2 of them have both had internships at a company, so they already know the safety procedures that I teach on the first day of engineering. I don't want them to be bored. I'll take the loud one, Midnight called out. I've got a class with third-year students who have the tendency of being lame, at least they were last year. Maybe the loud one can spice things up a bit. Thank you, I'll send Hatsum your way, Mr. Higuri replied, happy the problem of the 2 was taken care of. Now it's just Midoriya. This caught the attention of the man in the corner of the room. Tashinori's head shot up at the name's familiarity, and he turned to the group. Izuku Midoriya? He asked. The group turned to him in surprise since he had not yet spoken to any of them upon his arrival. Yeah, I guess you probably know him from a few years back, huh? Yes, I do, Tashinori replied. He made quite the impression on Dave. He was quite extraordinary for someone so young. 13 joined in. I rode back to Japan on the same plane as him. He had an entire notebook full of quirk and hero analysis. Did someone say analysis? Nisa said as he popped up from behind the couch. Many of the teachers jumped in both surprise and fear at the principal's appearance. Yes, he was quite good at it too, 13 added. Nisa hummed as he took a seat on the couch. I'll take him then. I would love to hear the ideas and analysis he has to share. The teachers watched as the principal seemed to shiver with excitement at the idea of a possible apprentice. It had been many years since Nisa had last found a student he deemed worthy of his personal training. Class 1H. Power Loader couldn't say he was shocked to see that Hatsum and Midoriya were seated at their desks while the rest of the class was probably still in the CAF. He had noticed quickly how the other students were treating them differently since they were so far ahead, but he was glad they had each other. Even if he knew it would mean double trouble in the future. Just the students I needed to see, he said as he took his seat at his desk. The 2 immediately quit their topic of conversation to look at their teacher. The engineering class will all be safety procedures you would have learned during your internships. So I found a spot for you 2 elsewhere for the period. Hatsum, you will be joining Midnight in Class 3C. Midoriya, you will be spending your time with Principal Nizu. Principal Nizu? Izuku stated, shocked. Yes, 13 told him about your analysis notebooks, and he was very intrigued. Power Loader continued as he leaned back in his chair. He smiled as he saw his students' faces go a bright red. Izuku turned to Mei to see that she looked rather down at the news. Something wrong, Mei-chan? Izuku asked, concerned. Mei turned to him with a small pout. This means we won't get to work on our babies today, she said. Izuku almost laughed at her pouty attitude. Don't worry, handsome, Power Loader soothed. Later in the year, students who exceed expectations in certain classes can spend extra time in the lab with me. I'm sure you two will be some of them. Izuku beamed at the idea. There were so many things he wanted to build. Ideas he wanted to explore. Chapter 13. Izuku silently made his way to Principal Nise's office. Every time he passed a class, he would peek through the window to see which pro hero was teaching. It was exciting to see so many of his idols in real life. When he finally arrived, he stopped and took a deep breath in front of the door. Izuku couldn't help but be nervous. Not only was this the principal of UA, this was one of the, if not the, most intelligent beings in the world. And he wanted to discuss who knows what with Quirkless Deku beacme. Right as Izuku was about to knock, the door was opened. Principal Nise beamed up at Izuku and he couldn't help but smile back at him. Hello, Midoriya. It's good to see you again. I hope you have been enjoying your first day, the principal said as he led Izuku into his office. Izuku followed him to a blue couch in the corner of the office as the principal began pouring them some tea. Of course. Yui is amazing. It's so much more than I could have imagined, Izuku said excitedly. He quickly stopped himself there before he began mumbling about all the things he still wanted to see on the school grounds. Glad to hear. I was also very excited to hear from 13 that you have quite the talent in hero analysis, Nise said as he handed Izuku his cup. Izuku blushed fiercely, embarrassed by the compliment. I wouldn't say talent. Really? It's just a hobby I've had since I was a kid. Izuku rushed, flustered. The most common hobbies in children involve a sport or a form of art, Nise stated. It is very rare for the average child's hobby to be analysis. Izuku blushed even more. Yeah. But that is not a bad thing. I am very curious as to what you have written in your books. May I ask how many you have? Nise asked, leaning slightly closer to Izuku. Well, I have 13 notebooks on hero/quirk analysis, and I just started my 6th notebook for support ideas, Izuku stated as he rubbed the back of his neck. Was that a lot? Fascinating, Nise beamed. Do you have any with you? Izuku opened his backpack and handed the 2 latest notebooks to his principal. Nise beamed as he read through the book's contents. As they went through the books, Nise asked Izuku various questions about his train of thought and where he got certain ideas from. Izuku was quick to realize that Nise could keep up quite easily to Izuku's rambling, and the two of them spoke much faster than anyone else in a normal conversation. He was sure that if someone were to come in on them, they would be rather confused to hear their rushed words spill into the air. Their conversation was interrupted when Izuku's phone began buzzing. He looked down to see Bakugo was calling him. Bakugo? If I recall correctly, he is currently in heroics with Almight, Nise said as he took a glance at Izuku's phone. Go ahead and answer. Izuku slid the answer button and brought the phone to his ear. Hello? Oi, nerd! I need you to come down to Gym Beta, Bakugo yelled through the phone. Why? One of my idiot classmates pulled the pins on my grenades. I need you to come reset them before it's my turn in the drill. Now hurry it up! Izuku didn't get the chance to answer as Bakugo ended the call. Kaken needs me to reset his support items, is that okay? Izuku asked as he looked to the principal. Nise smiled up at him and nodded. On one condition though, Nise said as he stood up, still reading Izuku's notebook. I would like to continue reading your analysis while we make our way to Gym Beta. The mammal turned to face Izuku with a smiling face. Can I ride in your backpack? Izuku's face dropped, an immediate "Huh!" escaping his lips as he stared at his principal in shock. There looks to be plenty of room in there, and you seem to have a sufficient amount of muscle on you. Do you work out? It is pretty uncommon for business and support students to be so athletic. The mammal rambled as he climbed into Izuku's yellow backpack. Izuku shook his head before carefully lifting his bag and placing it on his shoulders. As they walked, he listened to Nise's comments. He was too shocked by the fact that he was carrying his principal in his backpack to reply and add his own comments. Izuku was very careful when walking. He knew he was clumsy, and he did not want to explain to his mother that he got expelled for dropping his principal after tripping over a pebble. It didn't take them long to reach Gym Beta, and Izuku quickly saw Bakugo waiting for them by the gate. Izuku was slightly disappointed he wouldn't be able to go further into the grounds to watch some of their training, but he didn't say that. "There you are, nerd!" Bakugo yelled as he saw him approach. "Hurry it up, I'm up soon and I want a good amount of my sweat stored before then." Izuku placed his backpack on the ground. His principal still stayed in it as he read. Izuku looked up to see shock and confusion on Bakugo's face when he saw their principal casually hanging out in Izuku's backpack. Izuku let out a small chuckle as he began to reset the gauntlets. It didn't take him long, and just as he finished, one of Bakugo's classmates appeared. "Hey Bakugo! Your team is Dash." The red-haired boy Izuku recognized from the cafeteria stopped as he saw Izuku. "Oh, who's this?" "Hi. I'm Izuru Kiri Dash." "Shut it, shitty hair," Bakugo interrupted as he took the gauntlets from Izuku. Izuku gave the boy a small apologetic smile as Bakugo physically dragged him away from Izuku. "Guess Kaken really doesn't want us to be seen as friends at school," Izuku thought as he picked up his bag and carried the principal back to his private office. "Well, I must say, I have learned quite a bit about you by reading your analysis, Midoriya," Niza said as he exited the backpack. "How far are you in your science and maths courses?" "Well, I started taking beginner's science courses in my first year of middle school. By the end of my internship and my last year in middle school, my teacher told me I was probably at the same level of a third year in high school." Izuku mumbled the last bit as he rubbed the back of his head. "Remarkable. It isn't uncommon for support students to be ahead, but you really have outdone yourself in preparations. I would love to have more of these conversations with you. How about once every week?" Niza said as he took a seat behind his desk. Izuku beamed as he accepted the principal's offer, and he left the room. He quickly made his way to see his class was returning from the lab room and followed in after them. "Hey Midoriya!" Izuku heard one of them whisper and quickly turned to face them. "Why weren't you and Hatsum in class? Seriously, we get it, you're ahead. But why did you get to skip?" his classmate asked angrily. Sensei Higuri said that, since it was just lab safety that Hatsum and I already know him, that he thought Dash. Izuku stumbled over every word as he tried to explain the situation in a way his classmate wouldn't be angry with. Izuku stopped as he saw it wasn't working and quickly took his seat as President Mike entered the room to begin their English lesson. Izuku was happy to find that he was also ahead in English, but kept himself from answering any of the questions President Mike asked. He didn't need everyone else to know this was another thing Izuku was good at. "It's not my fault I have two friends who don't know Japanese." The day seemed to fly by. So much so that when the bell rang, Izuku couldn't help but feel sad the day was over. He quickly packed his bag and made his way into the hallway. He quickly realized the hallway was packed with first-year students, and waited patiently for things to settle down. As the hallway emptied, Izuku made his way to the exit. "The bell doesn't dismiss you, I do. Seriously. I thought we were finished with those kinds of things in middle school," someone mocked from behind him. "Do not disrespect our teacher, Mineta. If it wasn't for you interrupting him so many times, his lesson would have been finished," another criticized. Izuku turned to see Class 1A just leaving their classroom, Bakugo leading the group and seeming to almost run to try to get away from them. As he caught up to Izuku, he grabbed his arm and began to drag him to the exit. Bakugo! Wait up! Aren't you coming with us to the cafe?" The redhead, Kiri something, called. "Wait, isn't that your friend from the gate? Wait! I want to meet your friend." "Bakugo has friends. What class is he in? He doesn't look mean." The redhead finally caught up to the two and cut them off. Izuku watched as Bakugo seethed at being stopped. "Out of our way, shitty hair!" Bakugo yelled. The redhead ignored him as he put his hand forward to shake Izuku's. "I didn't get to finish my introduction earlier. I'm Izuru Kirishima." Kirishima smiled as Izuku took his hand. Izuku returned the smile that seemed too contagious not to. "Izuku Midoriya of Class 1H," Izuku said as the rest of the class caught up to the three. That's one of the support classes, right? A tall girl with dark hair and a ponytail asked. Izuku nodded, slightly blushing at all the eyes on him. We don't have time for this shit, Bakugo yelled as he grabbed Izuku's arm. We're gonna be late, Deku. Let's go to what, Kaken? Kaken? Is that your nickname? A blonde exclaimed from near them. Bakugo turned and gave the most ferocious glare Izuku had ever seen on his friend's face. Don't ever call me that again, dunce face, or I will end you, Bakugo stated calmly, anger dripping through. Izuku slowly took a step back, as did the rest of the group. Well, Kirishima started before turning to Izuku. We're heading to a cafe down the street. Would you like to join us, Midoriya? Before Izuku could answer, Bakugo grabbed his arm again. I already said no. We got a family dinner. Now move it, Bakugo said before trying to pull Izuku again. Izuku kept his feet planted as he pulled, and struggled, away from Bakugo. Once he was out of his hold, he turned to the group. Thank you for the invitation. Unfortunately, Kaken and I have dinner in celebration of our first day of school. Maybe next time, though, he said, giving them a small bow before following Bakugo. See you, Midoriya. Bye, Bakugo. Bye. Don't forget the homework. Many farewells could be heard from behind him, and Izuku turned back one more time to wave to the group. Kaken got really lucky with his classmates, they're all so nice. Your classmates seem great, Kaken, Izuku said as they got onto the train. Huh? No, they're not. They're all annoying extras, Bakugo responded with an angry look. Everyone is an extra to you, Izuku laughed. But seriously, compared to my class, yours is a lot more welcoming, Izuku said as he looked around the train. What? Who the buck do I have to kill? I swear, I'll blow those extras to dash. Kaken, no! Izuku interrupted. You aren't fighting anyone. I just meant that things are a little more competitive in my class, and since me and Mei-chan are a little ahead, the others are a little hesitant. That's all. Bakugo lowered his hand from its battle position and looked at Izuku. You being ahead just means you're better than them. Idiots should have known better if they want to be the best, Bakugo said more calmly than before. It isn't about being the best, Kaken, Izuku said, embarrassed. It's not about climbing the charts. It's about helping heroes so they can save people. The conversation shifted from classmates to teachers, and the two let out their fanboy excitement over meeting their favorite heroes in person. Almight even said that I had a strong quirk, which I knew, but he still said it, and that I had great potential, Bakugo said in awe of being praised by his hero. Izuku smiled at the look on his friend's face as they talked about school. His day may not have been perfect, but when is it ever? He had a friend and he had Kaken. Maybe he would even become friends with some of Class 1A. Hey Kaken? Izuku called as the two walked to the Bakugo house. Would you be mad at me if I got along with your classmates? Izuku asked. When no response came, he looked over to see his friend looking at him like he was an idiot. You're a dumbass, I don't give a shit. We're friends, so you're bound to run into them like I'm bound to run into this Mei-chan chick. Just watch what you tell them about me, Bakugo said before turning to stare ahead of them again. But I thought you didn't want us to be friends at school? Izuku asked, a little confused. I said that because I wanted you to make friends in your own bucking class, Bakugo responded. If we walked to school and ate lunch, can you say that you still would have become friends with that extra? Izuku paused to think before shaking his head no. Exactly. Izuku smiled as they arrived at the house. For the rest of the evening he talked to his mother, aunt, and uncle about school. He told them about Mei-chan, Power Loader, Principal Nizu, Bakugo's classmate Kirishima, and more. They were all shocked, but proud, to hear the principal had taken a liking to him. The most difficult part of the evening, though, was trying to finish his homework with Bakugo and Natsuki yelling at each other over who was weirder. In Izuku's opinion, neither were. But the two had always argued about who embarrassed who was weirder, who was stupid, and who had more major anger issues. When Izuku finally finished, he laughed as Mitsuki held a paper over Bakugo's face that said, I like to collect dolls.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.